Chapter 85. In the cold wind, the wheels rolled over the withered yellow leaves, crushing them into even finer pieces that floated up on the road behind them. A carriage covered in thick black cotton slowly drove towards a relay station on the outskirts of Chongling. There were many swordsmen from the warden's office standing around the relay station, out of the ordinary. These swordsmen were dressed in ordinary clothing, but had black metal swords at their waists. They looked at the carriage that came in the autumn and frowned in unison. They clearly knew who the person in the carriage was. When they thought about how this person was able to survive the cruel slaughter that night, and then thought about the reason this person had come, their expressions were all vigilant, and their hearts uneasy. In silence, the carriage stopped at the gates of the relay station. Wang Taishu, dressed in black brocade robes, walked out of the carriage. He pulled in his collar as though he was afraid of the cold, nodded politely at the swordsman, and then stepped through the gates of the relay station. With his hands behind his back, Yugu suddenly looked at the winter suite outside the window. His white hair was combed neatly. Even though he was dressed in the most ordinary of casual clothes, anyone who saw his murderous posture would quickly conclude that he was a general who had been on the battlefield for a long time and was covered in the aura of gold and steel. You should not have come at all. Only when Wang Taishi walked behind him did this important official of the warden's office slowly turn around. He looked coldly at Wang Taishu and said, "To be able to survive that kind of night, your luck is already extremely good. You should properly enjoy the rest of your life that was not easy to come by." Wang Taishu looked at this powerful official and shook his head. He said, "General Yu, you are wrong. I was able to survive that night not because of luck, but because many people died for me." Yugu's expression turned cold. Wang Taishu coughed softly, took out multiple files from his sleeve, and handed them to Yugu. Yugu already knew what was recorded in these files. He did not immediately take them and said gravely, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Wang Taishu laughed and said softly, "In the eyes of many nobles, we are small fish and shrimps in the marketplace, things that can be casually crushed to death, things that can be washed away by a rain. However, each of my dead brothers had a family, old and young. If I do not do anything, my heart will not be satisfied. There is no meaning in living." Yugu glanced at him and took the files. He slowly opened them, and his expression grew colder the more he read. "We have many files that are enough to send many officials to prison. How many officials in Chongling have not done shady business and taken black money?" Wang Taishu looked calmly at Yugu. "Originally, I do not interfere. I will not care about other people's paths, but one of you crossed the line. Enough." Yugu sneered as he put away the files and threw them into the brazier at the side. "State your conditions." Wang Taishi looked calmly at him and said, "The only large business your warden's office can decide on in Chongling right now are the storage and mining." Yugu laughed disdainfully. He did not answer Wang Taishi's words. Just the storage and transportation of the Chongling warden's office was a business worth countless taels of silver each year. And the mining of copper and iron, the manufacturing and purchasing of armor, the forging of weapons, how much profit was contained in these businesses? This was an exorbitant demand, so much so that even his own mouth was cracking. Wang Taishu did not say much. He coughed softly and stood up to bid farewell. After he had walked a dozen steps, Yugu looked coldly at his back and said in a cold voice, "Even if you do not care for your life, even if you have many people willing to die for you, think of your status. Do you think such a request is possible?" Hearing the words, Wang Taishu turned his head. A sincere smile appeared on his pale face. "That night, there was a wine shop youth who escaped the assassination of your military experts. You should know better than me what kind of opponent he killed. You should also know that he is only cultivated for a short time." He looked with a smile at Yugu and slowly said, "On my way here, I received news that he won the Sword Trial Festival of White Goat Cave and Green Vine Sword Academy and became one of the top 3 disciples. If this was a month ago, who would have thought it was possible for a wine shop youth to escape such an assassination and have such astounding improvement? Since this is possible, then there is nothing impossible for me to do." After saying this with a smile, Wang Taishu decisively turned around and did not look at the expression of the warden's office official behind him. A swordsman in his 30s walked out from the side door, behind Yu Gu. He bowed to Yu Gu and looked at the departing carriage. He asked, "General, should we kill him?" "No need." Yu Gu, whose expression had recovered, shook his head. When it comes to negotiations, one side will negotiate a high price, and the other side will slowly pay. Wang Taishu's attitude in this meeting shows that he knows where the boundaries are. He did not ask for more people to pay with their lives. He is only using the method of suppressing this matter to ask for more benefits in Chongling. He and his subordinates will have a deeper foundation in Chongling in the future and be safer. Also, our warden's office has had enough problems. If more trouble occurs, many people above may not be able to keep their positions. Yu Gu thought for a moment and then ordered the standing swordsman. Go investigate the news of that youth from White Goat Cave. If he is, as Wang Taishu says, he is a talent. Green Vine Sword Academy. Li Daoji, Duanmu Lian, Shui Wangshu, Di Qingmei, some of the important people of White Goat Cave and Green Vine Sword Academy were waiting on the mountain path to greet the three winners. Zhang Yi walked at the very front. He walked in front of these people and bowed calmly. Ding Ning and Nangong Kaishu also bowed. Everyone returned the greeting. Ding Ning looked up at Li Daoji, who still had a stern expression. He was the first to thank him. Sect Uncle Li Daoji, thank you for your sword. Li Daoji raised an eyebrow. He seemed to feel that Ding Ning's special thanks was not necessary. But after hesitating, he still said, "You did well and did not waste the sword. Most importantly, I did not waste your good intentions." Ding Ning smiled slightly and turned to look at Shui Wangshu, who was stroking his beard. "Thank you, Shui, for your special treatment and for giving me the chance to cultivate in the spirit vein. This is the reward you deserve. There is no need to thank me. If you want to thank Principal D. The green suet jade he gave you will be even more useful in the future." Shui Wangshu looked in satisfaction at Nangong Kaishu and then said to Ding Ning. Ding Ning saw something from his and Di Qingmei's expressions. He bowed with a smile and gave special thanks to Di Qingmei. "Thank you, Principal D." Di Qingmei's expression was the most unnatural, but he still sincerely returned the greeting. He said softly, "I am very satisfied to have students like you." Most of the outer school students had not left. After such a necessary event was completed, many people gathered. Brother-in-law Xie Chongsheng, who was about the same age as Ding Ning, was the first to reach Ding Ning. He said with great admiration, "Your performance is so satisfying. I have to admit that my sister has better eyes than me." "Do not call me brother-in-law." Ding Ning's expression immediately became awkward. "Do not mess around." Xie Ro snorted softly. She walked in front of Ding Ning and bowed seriously. She asked softly, "Will you attend the Min Mountain Sword trials next year?" Ding Ning did not understand the meaning of her question. He hesitated. "I should. In that case, I will do my best to attend the Min Mountain Sword trials," Xie Ro responded softly. Xie Chongsheng stilled. "Sister, do you want to win the Min Mountain Sword trials with him and then obtain the chance to study in Min Mountain Sword sect?" Xie Ro did not answer him, but the slight blush on her white neck exposed her thoughts. "Take it slow. Love grows with time." "This is very good." Xie Chongsheng pinched his nose and said admiringly. "Do not have any expectations of me." But Ding Ning's gaze landed on the last flower remnant sword at his waist. His expression quickly hardened, covered in frost that kept people at bay. He walked away and said coldly, "As to the reason, Nangong Kaishu knows." "What is the reason?" Su Hushan, Xie Chongsheng, and the others looked in puzzlement at Nangong Kaishu. Shock even appeared in Xie Chongsheng's eyes. "Nangong Kaishu, did you and him cultivate together for a night in the library cave and develop feelings for each other and decide to marry each other? Do not be so childish." Nangong Kaishu's expression darkened. She looked at Ding Ning's back as he left. She knew that since Ding Ning had said so, he would allow her to tell these people the reason. So she took a deep breath and said softly, "Because his body has a problem. It is a rare body with excessive yang. If he did not have special encounters, his body would have deteriorated when we were at our strongest. Xie Changsheng was stunned. He really admired Ding Ning's performance, so he couldn't even make a joke at this moment. Even if his body has such a problem, I will not change my decision. Xie Ro bit her lips. I will do my best to help him. I have already learned that there is usually no cure for this kind of premature deteriorating body. But Min Mountain Sword Sect is not an ordinary sect. Some people in this sect may have a solution. Nangong Kaishu looked at her, Xie Changsheng, and the others. She nodded and said, if we really have a solution, we will do our best to help him when the Min Mountain Sword trials. This is too difficult. Su Hashan shook his head worriedly. The Min Mountain Sword trials would be in the middle of the summer next year. Starting from now, it would only be half a year. Even though Ding Ning had such a cultivation speed and performance, he still did not have much confidence when he thought of the performance of those monsters in the past. He is fighting for his life. We will do our best, Nangong Kaishu nodded and said gravely. All right, we will do our best for the Min Mountain Sword trials. Xie Changsheng, Su Hashan, and Xie Ro reached out and gave each other a high five. Encouraging each other so solemnly for the sake of another's victory seemed to be a very laughable thing. But this was a matter of life, and they had to make something that seemed impossible possible. The atmosphere was unusually solemn. Chapter 86. You are too cold to them. Li Daoji appeared in front of Ding Ning. He glanced at Xie Changsheng, Xie Ro, and the others in the distance. Then he looked coldly at Ding Ning and said slowly, do not misunderstand. I mean, even if you do not like Xie Ro's actions, you do not have to treat them so coldly and roughly. Ding Ning was silent for a moment. Li Daoji waited patiently for him. Ding Ning looked at the broken sword at his waist and said softly and slowly, Sect Uncle Li Daoji, since you helped me find this broken sword, you should know the story related to this sword. Li Daoji's brow furrowed. You know the story of this sword? Before the Yuanwu Emperor ascended the throne, the Qin dynasty had a famous cultivation place called the Bazin Kendo Ground. Ding Ning's expression was calm. He said in a light tone as though he was telling a story. In many stories, the Bazin Kendo Ground is a higher existence than Min Mountain Sword Sect and Lingshu Sword Gate. Because the Qin dynasty defeated the three dynasties and even helped the Yuanwu Emperor ascend the throne, many cultivators who were decisive came from the Bazin Kendo Ground. But there was a great change before the Yuanwu Emperor ascended the throne. Countless cultivators who were originally loyal to the Qin dynasty became traitors overnight. Some of them were of high status. Even the Yuanwu Emperor had to admit that they had a great influence on the future of the Qin dynasty. Yan Xinlan of the Bazin Kendo Ground was one of them. If she said something the Yuanwu Emperor wanted to hear and publicly expressed her attitude, she could have lived nobly. The Bazin Kendo Ground would have continued to exist, and today, it would have a higher status than Min Mountain Sword Sect and Lingshu Sword Gate. However, she chose to wave her sword at the Yuanwu Emperor to show her unyielding attitude. Hearing Ding Ning's words, Li Daoji's expression grew more unnatural. He finally couldn't help but say, what does a child know? Many things happened before you were born. Since you know so many stories, you should understand that many stories can't be mentioned again. And what do these stories have to do with your current attitude towards them? Xie Ro's personality is likely very similar to the master of this last flower sword. I do not dislike her, and even admire her. But you know my situation better than anyone else. Ding Ning looked up at him and said, you know that I have offended an important person in the military. Even Li Lingjun is concerned about me. My physical condition will determine that I will climb up quickly in Chongling. I do not know how many people I will offend. I will risk my life to do some things because I have a goal, but I cannot drag them with me to do something like this. You worry that Xie Ro will have the same fate as the master of this last flower sword? Li Daoji said disdainfully, you are thinking too far ahead. Ding Ning shook his head. If a person does not think far ahead, they will have immediate worries. Li Daoji stopped persuading Ding Ning and turned around. But after walking a few steps, he stopped and turned to look at Ding Ning. He said, You mentioned the story of the master of the last flower sword, but do you know what the master of the last flower sword thinks? How do you know she is unhappy? Compared to living the rest of her life in luxury, she would probably be happier if she fought until her sword broke and died like this. Not many people can live without regrets, but she may have done it. Ding Ning was silent. In these years in Chongling, he had seen many people he usually did not pay attention to. He had also seen all kinds of people he had never talked about before. Peddlers, fishermen, woodcutters, prostitutes, rich merchants, slaves. There were also many immigrants from the Wei, Han, and Zhao dynasties who had slowly merged with Chongling and become citizens of the Qin dynasty. Some still remembered their homeland, some people on the fringes, and some people who had completely forgotten their homeland. They wanted to obtain the same status as the people of Chongling and climb up in the Qin dynasty, but were pushed aside. He had comprehended many things from these people and learned to stand in their shoes and see some things. He admitted that Li Daoji's words were correct, but he was certain that if Li Daoji knew what kind of rebellious heart was beating in his chest, he would not say such things. No matter how outstanding and admirable the legendary first Mr. Zhao of the Zhao Sword Furnace and Bai Shanshui of Cloud Water Palace were, who would persuade people to be friends with such rebellious people? Some things were easier for future generations to judge and see clearly after they had passed. In the past, in the wars between the Qin dynasty and the Han, Zhao, and Wei dynasties, the situation changed rapidly. Hundreds of thousands of swordsmen could die in one battle, and thousands of cultivators could be lost. No one could predict the outcome. But now that the Han, Zhao, and Wei Huifei were destroyed, many of the history books in the future had the same opinion about the reasons for victory and defeat. In the current mainstream history books and even the authoritative records, the Han dynasty was destroyed, mainly because they failed to move the capital. The original capital of the Han dynasty, which had once relied on some pill sects, had been Yangdi. But some strategists of the Qin dynasty had used many methods to instill some ideas into Emperor Ai of Han and painted a beautiful future. This caused him to believe that if the Han dynasty wanted to have greater power, they had to move the capital to Luoyi. At the time, moving the capital to Luoyi seemed to have great benefits because there was Shao Mountain to the left of Luoyi. The Jade Valley in Shao Mountain had dense spirit energy and was the best cultivation place in the world. If many sects moved to the Jade Valley, they could send more powerful cultivators to the dynasty. To the right of Luoyi was the fertile land of Lushu, with plenty of granaries. But many people and nobles did not move because of the capital. Because of the loss of benefits, there were many conflicts with Emperor Ai of Han. After the capital was moved, some new factions rose up and divided the new capital. This caused the power of the dynasty to decrease, and in the end, it was destroyed. The destruction of the Wei was two major events. One was the plan of the Spirit Canal. Under the influence of some conspiracies, the Wei dynasty started to gather countless skilled craftsmen and wanted to build an enormous spirit canal that could absorb large amounts of spirit energy. The construction of this spirit canal used up countless resources of the Wei dynasty, and the country's power gradually weakened. The other one was the Wei Cloud Water Palace's monopoly. At a certain time, many astounding cultivators appeared in the Cloud Water Palace. The king of Wei became more and more reliant on the Cloud Water Palace. Many things leaned towards the Cloud Water Palace. In the end, the Cloud Water Palace dominated, and many cultivation sects withered or even died. The destruction of the Zhao was the classic use of sowing dissension. At the most crucial time of the Qin dynasty and the Zhao dynasty's war, the Qin dynasty successfully convinced the king of Zhao that the Zhao sword furnace would work with the Qin dynasty and eventually take his position. So he killed the strongest grandmaster of the Zhao and created the sword of the Zhao sword furnace. Then the Qin dynasty's army had no more fear and destroyed the Zhao dynasty in less than 3 months. Even for many people of the Qin dynasty who had made many plans and won in the end, there were many things they could learn from and ponder about in the destruction of these 3 dynasties. After all, in the ever-changing war, who knew how many great figures were exerting their strength, and who knew how many schemes were being carried out at the same time? Only in the future would one discover which ones had played a role. Especially the fact that the way Cloudwater Palace dominated and caused many pill sects to weaken and affect the country's power. This was a warning to the dynasties. So, at this time in Chongling, while the Yuanwu emperor had more control than the previous emperors of the Qin dynasty, and he, the empress, and the two prime ministers formed a group that firmly suppressed and controlled all the nobility of the Qin dynasty, the central dynasty deliberately maintained most of the cultivation places in their initial state. Other than providing some protection and support, they were allowed to grow naturally like weeds. The process of the Wei dynasty's destruction made the later generations understand that no matter how weak a sect appeared, as long as it maintained the state when it was founded and the essence of the sect was maintained, then this sect might suddenly become strong many years later because of some talented people. The number of cultivators that a powerful sect could send out that were useful to the entire dynasty was far less than the sum of the small and medium-sized sections. So, after the Wei dynasty was destroyed, the dynasties did their best to ensure that all the sects in their dynasty could exist for a long time. Things like White Goat Cave merging into the Green Vine Sword Academy were rare. Most sects were deliberately maintained in their original state, so they were like peaceful places cut off from the world. The cultivators in the sects only had to consider the problem of increasing their cultivation. For the Green Vine Sword Academy, the 3 days of seclusion was like 3 days of isolation from Chongling. So, at this time, while the Sword Trial Festival had ended, and some of the results and events had spread, Ding Ning did not know many astounding events had occurred in Chongling as he walked on the mountain path. Chapter 87. In Chongling, an official of the Bureau of Ceremonies walked nervously with his head down on the stone path with tall pine trees on both sides. In front of him, an old imperial censor dressed in gray robes stood in the middle of the stone path. The closer he got to this imperial censor, the more sweat this official of the Bureau of Ceremonies sweated. Officially, when he walked in front of this imperial censor and bowed, the back of this official's thick robes was completely soaked. There is no need for this. This imperial censor glanced coolly at him and said slowly, "You know that my duty is to bring the Holy One's decrees to promote or demote officials. Since I want to meet you, and you have not done anything to promote you recently, you should be sure that you will be demoted. The matter is confirmed, and there is no need to be so nervous and worried." Hearing the words in the cold wind, this official did not calm down. He felt the wind grow colder, and even his body started to tremble. "Your previous rewards have been forfeited. You will go to the border and enlist for 5 years. If you want you and your family to have a good life in Chongling, you should accumulate more military merits in these 5 years, Imperial Censor Li said expressionlessly. The religion sector official raised his head, his expression extremely ugly. "Sir Li, I know that the reason I suffered this type of demotion is because I was on the escape route Bai Shanshui took that day, but I believe that there were many other officials on that route. Why was I punished so heavily?" "You think you are the only one who was punished so heavily?" Imperial Censor Li shook his head expressionlessly. "Before you, I met 5 people here. That day, Bai Shanshui charged out of the city. Including you, there were 17 Chongling cultivators on his escape route that could have delayed him. 8 of them acted and died to Bai Shanshui's sword. If the 9 of you acted, the sealed chariots of the Tiger Wolf army would have been able to set up a formation to stop Bai Shanshui. Of the 9 of you, 7 are officials of the court. These 7 officials will all be demoted." The official of the Bureau of Ceremonies had an even uglier expression, but he could not speak. Imperial Censor Li continued to speak. "You cherish your lives and don't dare to step forward. Have you ever thought about how shameful this is? Bai Shanshui killed his way out. The Qin dynasty has so many strong armies, so many cultivators, and he killed his way out of the capital Chongling, and not when the war was urgent and Chongling was empty. As a man of Qin, we could have stopped him and killed him. Instead, we let him sing crazily with his sword in his hand as if he was in an unstoppable place. This is even more humiliating than letting him escape after a hard fight. His Majesty asked me to speak with you in the Ing Garden so that you can think about it." The face of the Qin dynasty and your present good days were fought for by the countless dead Qin people resting in the garden. Have you ever thought about how many Tiger Wolf army soldiers have died because you cherish your life? In the future, when those enemy countries look down on us, how many more soldiers and cultivators will die? How many ordinary people have been affected? His Majesty hopes that you can change your way of thinking. Anyone who hates work and wants to protect their own family and not care for others does not deserve to live in Chongling. For me, it is better to lie quietly in the Yin Garden than to be banished and humiliated. In the Dark Divinity Bureau, Mo Qinggong stood with his head bowed in front of a young and thin man dressed in deep red robes. His short beard was extremely messy. This man, who looked slightly dispirited and did not seem to give off a powerful presence, was the head of the Divinity Bureau, Chief Inspector Chen. "This is definitely not an accident," Mo Qinggong said coldly. The Chongling Guard was lured to the Jiujiang Commandery meeting hall because of a stolen item in the Imperial Mausoleum. The person who sold the item and gave the clues was an idler without a wife or parents in Chongling. He died mysteriously, and even our investigation has reached a stalemate. Hearing Mo Qinggong's report, Chief Inspector Chen's fingers crossed and flicked slightly. He seemed to have completed many thoughts in a flash. He raised his head. The deep and bright red robes on his body formed a strong contrast with his dispirited appearance. Just this contrast made him exceptionally attractive. We do not have to pursue this dead thread. Even if the Divinity Bureau does all we can, we may not be able to find out who has the ability to do such a thing. His black pupils were dyed slightly red by his robes. He looked at Mo Qinggong's dark face and said in a calm tone, "Start from another direction. Investigate those people who may know about Bai Shan Shui and the Lonely Mountain-Soar Horde. Investigate what their confidants have done in these days. This kind of thing will definitely only be handed over to their most trusted confidants." Mo Qinggong's eyes lit up slightly. He said softly, "This subordinate understands." Chief Inspector Chen frowned at this time. After a moment of thought, he said, "Put more pressure on the people of the warden's office. They are the most involved in this matter. They must give an explanation. If we use their power, our work will be smoother." Mo Qinggong already had such thoughts. Hearing Chief Inspector Chen say it personally, his heart warmed and his tense body relaxed. He said nothing else, turned and left. When he walked out of the room, his body unconsciously paused for a moment. Just now, the sky was clear, but now it was covered in lead clouds. Waves of coldness came down from the sky. It looked like the winter solstice was not here yet, but snow was about to fall. Outside Chongling, on a certain vast part of the Wei River under the lead clouds, a small boat with a black awning slowly floated along with the waves. A fishing boat came from the distance. When it came close to the awning boat, a faint light flashed. A man dressed as a fisherman landed firmly at the bow of the awning boat. But this awning boat did not even sway. This man dressed as a fisherman was one of the direct disciples of Cloud Water Palace, Fanjua, who had disguised himself as a carriage driver in front of the Jiujiang Commandery meeting hall a few days ago. He looked at the outline of Chongling in the distance. A hint of disdain appeared at the corners of his mouth. He said to the cabin covered in black curtains, "You are the person who sent me a letter a few days ago? Which noble person of Chongling is the master behind you?" The black curtains were pulled apart by a thin bamboo pole and hung on both sides. The white-haired advisor in black robes sitting in the cabin gestured for him to enter the cabin. He said, "The one who told you to leave was General Liang. General Liang, who is waiting to be made a marquis?" However, even though Fanjua was dressed like a fisherman, he still exuded the insufferably arrogant aura unique to a great rebel. He had no intention of entering the cabin at all. He only mocked, "What do you mean by rebelling in the nest? A fish is trapped in a vat and wants to jump out. But without some help, it cannot enter the great rivers to swim freely and will fall to the ground and dry to death." The black-robed advisor smiled unconcernedly. He pointed at the majestic Chongling in the distance and said, "For you, Chongling is also a vat. You will be in danger if you enter. So General Liang feels that you need some friends." Fanj was sneered. We cannot become friends with the Qin. The black-robed advisor said coolly, even if we cannot become friends, we can at least use each other. Also, you owe us a favor. If not for the letter I gave you, you would not know that you were targeted by the Divinity Bureau. When it was time to close the net, even Bai Shanshui would not be able to escape Chongling, much less you. While I do not know how many secrets of the Lonely Mountain Sword Horde you have stayed in Chongling for too long. Anyone can conclude that there should be something related to the Lonely Mountain Sword Horde in Chongling.
Is it a key?
Or more clues? Before Fanjua could speak, the black-robed advisor looked into his eyes and said, "But you left Chongling in a hurry. You cannot get what you want. You must enter Chongling again. So you accepted the suggestion in my letter and came here to meet me today." "You are right." Fanjua sneered. "I have to admit that your Divinity Bureau and a few other nobles have the ability to discover our tracks and even guess at some of our intentions. I've come here to see if there are any nobles with enough weight to make use of each other. As for Great General Liang, forget about it." In the bloody storm before the Yuanwu Emperor ascended the throne, General Liang walked over the corpses of his brothers and friends to reach his position. How can we trust someone like him? There is no eternal friendship, only eternal benefit. The black-robed advisor's expression did not change. His gaze grew even more determined. With General Liang's status, cooperating with you is a matter of life and death. There is nothing more important in this world than settling down. So you do not have to worry. Fanjua laughed disdainfully. His laughter was loud and clear. It traveled along the river surface, like the tails of many big fishes beating on the river surface. There are many things in this world that are more important than life. But for people like General Liang and you, settling down is the most important. It does not matter what you think of us, as long as we have value to each other. The black-robed advisor laughed and said. Fanjua's smile slowly disappeared. He looked at the black-robed advisor and said, "What do you want? To help you become a marquis? We will not ask about your whereabouts in Chongling. We will be responsible for hiding your whereabouts and ensuring your safety in Chongling. We only need something that can help General Liang advance in cultivation, regardless of whether it is the Lonely Mountain Sword Horde or the secret manuals of Cloudwater Palace." The black-robed advisor shook his head and said, "There is no position in this world that is more important than true power." Chapter 88. At the gates of White Goat Cave, the dozen or so White Goat Cave teachers who had been left behind looked with joy at the White Goat Cave people that appeared on the nearby mountain path. The final news of the Sword Trial Festival came. White Goat Cave had taken 2 of the final 3 victors, and the new genius Ding Ning had an exceptional performance. Everyone in White Goat Cave felt honored, and even had some hope. Ding Ning got off the carriage. He had to greet and accept the congratulations. "Where is Su Qin?" A teacher did not see Su Qin's figure, but knew that Su Qin's left hand was crippled. He couldn't help but ask Li Daoji in a low voice. Li Daoji answered. After the Sword Trial Festival ended, he left the Green Vine Sword Academy without saying goodbye. Since he did not return, it means he will not return. The teacher let out a long sigh. He's too sharp and aggressive. Even a gentle and honest person like Zhang Yi is being targeted. It's too much. It's a pity that he has such good talent. Are you going to rest in White Goat Cave today, or return to your home in Falling Parasol? Shui Wangshu, who was walking at the front, turned slightly and asked Ding Ning. "I have not returned for many days. My aunt must be worried about me, so I will return to my home in Falling Parasol to rest." Ding Ning frowned slightly as though he was thinking. He said softly, "I also wanted to talk to you about some things. I grew up in the marketplace and am used to that kind of place. White Goat Cave is so quiet that I do not feel comfortable. In the future, I want to cultivate more outside. Cultivation pursues comfort and freedom. The most comfortable state is the most beneficial for cultivation." Shui Wangshu did not refuse, but when he turned his head, many complicated emotions appeared in his eyes. "Come with me first." Ding Ning calmly followed behind Shui Wangshu. "The green suet jade is not ordinary. How do you prepare to use it?" Shui Wangshu asked from the front. Ding Ning replied, I'm preparing to refine it when I get back tonight, so I don't have to worry about it. Shui Wangxu was silent for a long moment and then said, this is a good idea. While the green suet jade is most useful in Realm 3 to 4 breakthroughs, and after Realm 6, it can allow cultivators to better accept some life bond items, there are too many variables in the future. It is good to just look at the present. Ding Ning looked at him strangely. Cave Master, you seem to be a little depressed today. You're not as carefree as you usually are. Shui Wangxu laughed. Is that so? You can even tell that I have something on my mind? As they chatted, the two of them, one at the front and one at the back, climbed up the mountain path that White Goat Cave had carved out along the mountain walls. While their pace was not fast, they pulled away from everyone in White Goat Cave behind them. All the White Goat Cave members behind them had stopped and looked in shock at them. Shui Wangxu led Ding Ning towards the small temple at the highest point. Ever since Du Qingjiao left White Goat Cave, only Li Daoji qualified to enter this small temple. This small temple was the origin of White Goat Cave and had extraordinary significance. Ding Ning finally confirmed that Shui Wangxu was unusual today. Yet he did not say anything and just followed calmly. The mountain path ended in front of the library cave. Shui Wangxu continued forward and stepped into the void. Ding Ning did not hesitate. Just like before, he stepped into the empty space ahead of him. His body fell slightly. A wave of primal energies of the universe came from the front and lifted him up. There seemed to be an invisible staircase in the world. He and Shui Wangxu walked among the white clouds. On the mountain path, Li Daoji and the others had grave expressions. The furnishings of the small temple were extremely simple. Because it was embedded into the mountain wall, even the light was dim. Shui Wangxu did not explain anything and just walked forward until he faced the innermost mountain wall of the temple. He waved the small white jade sword at his waist. This was the sword of the master of White Goat Cave and also the key to opening the forbidden grounds. When a pure white yuan qi blew on the mountain wall in front of him, the seemingly flat mountain wall suddenly spurted out a wave of air and then slowly moved, revealing the cave inside. A ball of gentle white light appeared in front of Ding Ning. He saw that the cave in front of him was no more than a few feet in radius. The walls were made of white jade, and these walls were full of handwriting and pictures. It was obvious that some sword manuals were recorded. While the sword manuals in the library cave have some good points, these sword manuals are more unique. The Wildfire Sword Manual is good for defense, but not enough for killing. Shui Wangxu looked at Ding Ning, who was looking calmly, and said, Your comprehension is extraordinary. I will not make any suggestions. You can choose one to cultivate. Ding Ning nodded. He slowly walked into this cave with white jade walls. Frowning slightly, he scanned each line of writing on the jade walls. His frown deepened. After looking at all the jade walls, he turned to look at Shui Wangxu and asked seriously, Then can I choose two? Shui Wangxu stilled slightly. He did not immediately answer. After looking at Ding Ning for a moment, he smiled slightly. I only learned one. But if you feel it is useful, you can learn all of them, much less two. Su Qin stood in front of a tightly shut door with his head bowed. Behind the gate was a continuous stretch of courtyards, luxurious and deep. This was Li Lingjuan's residence. After the Sword Trial Festival ended, he had left the Green Vine Sword Academy alone. No one knew that he had come here in the end and was waiting here with his head bowed. Looking at his numb left hand, the corners of his lips moved, and he smiled bitterly. His smile was filled with pain. His birth had been poor. So even though his talent was outstanding, he had been threatened and ostracized when he participated in the exams of some sections. In the end, he could only settle down in White Goat Cave. In White Goat Cave, he was like a crane among chickens. Even Di Qingmei of the Green Vine Sword Academy was interested in recruiting him. White Goat Cave was a cultivation place that even the Empress paid attention to. In the future, if he acted according to the Empress' wishes, he would have a bright future. He was already extremely afraid of living those days of poverty, being threatened, and being ostracized. He only wanted to become a nobleman who could threaten and ostracize others. However, the sudden appearance of a wine shop youth, a trial, and a single sword strike had destroyed everything he currently possessed. Compared to the pain in his heart, he could not feel the pain in his body. In the deep courtyard, in the noble and elegant study, Li Lingjun looked up at Lu Sish and said gently, "That wine shop youth surprised me again." Lu Sish said apologetically, "It was my mistake. It has nothing to do with you." No one would have thought that he would have such a performance, especially when I spoke with him personally. I could not connect him to such a monster. Li Lingjun glanced at Lu Sish. "Is Su Qin still standing at the door?" Lu Sish nodded. "Still waiting." Li Lingjun said with slight disdain. "What did he say to you? Why does he feel he has the right to wait for my reply?" Lu Sish said calmly. When he asked for an audience, he said that while his left hand is crippled, his circulation of energies, his perception of the primal energies of the universe, and his comprehension of sword skills far surpass ordinary cultivators. Even if his right hand cannot perform exquisite sword skills, he has reached vital energy realm at his age. If he reaches realm 5 one day, when he uses a flying sword, losing his left hand will not be a hindrance. That is a good idea. If he uses a flying sword, he will not lose his hand. But when a flying sword attacks from afar, it does not have much defense against close combat. So, which of the Realm 5 cultivators in Chongling does not have 2 swords? Don't tell me that when he reaches the 5th realm, he'll have to find another personal attendant to guard him? Li Lingjun shook his head and said slowly, to be able to organize his emotions in such a short time and think of some countermeasures, adding on his previous performance, his personality is too vicious. Compared to Mo Chun, who knew he could not do it, but still made a last attempt because of my sword, I admire Mo Chun more. I think the snow dandelion sword you gave him has value. Lu Sish thought the same. He said, "Then should we chase him away?" Li Lingjun thought for a long time. "I am in need of people. Let's see if he can be made, and if he can be of use to me." Many breaths later, he made a decision. He looked at Lu Sish and said, "Have him take care of the horses for me, and wash the stables." Su Qin suddenly looked up. The door that had been closed for a long time finally opened. But what appeared in front of him was only a servant girl in blue robes. He immediately sensed something and his face paled slightly. "Come with me." The servant girl in blue robes glanced casually at him and said as though she was commanding a coarser servant. Then she turned and did not even look at Su Qin, who was standing outside the door. Su Qin took a deep breath and followed. After passing through many courtyards, the servant girl in blue robes took out a handkerchief and covered her nose in disgust. She stopped outside a stable. She turned to look at Su Qin. Seeing the blood and yellow medicine on the bandage on Su Qin's left hand, her gaze grew disgust, as though his body was as smelly as the manure in the stables. She pressed the handkerchief tighter and said quickly, "Master has ordered that you can stay here to help him clean the stables and take care of the horses." Su Qin's face grew paler. He saw the flowing feces in the stables behind this green-clothed servant girl. Thinking that he would one day be associated with these things and suffer such humiliation, he couldn't say anything for a moment. "Do you want to stay in the Fu or not? If you don't want to stay in the mansion, then come out with me now." The servant girl in green said fiercely, and then directly left. Su Qin still did not speak. The servant girl's eyebrows rose slightly. Just as she was about to rage, unexpectedly, Su Qin took a deep breath and walked towards the stables. He started to carry water and wash the stables. Chapter 89. At night, the curtain of night seemed to be unable to hold back the precipitation of winter. White snowflakes started to appear in the sky. The carriage waiting at the gates of White Goat Cave had been wrapped in black cloth, but now it was slowly dyed white. Ding Ning walked out of the gates of White Goat Cave. He did not have an umbrella. When he walked to the front of the carriage, he bowed to Jing Mazong, who was still dressed in gray robes. Then he patted his clothes, scratched his hair, and got rid of the snow on his body. Then he lifted the thick black cloth and entered the carriage. "You're really weak." Looking at Wang Taishu, who was dressed in a fox fur robe and seemed to have buried himself in a pile of fox fur, Ding Ning could not help but say, "After this winter, I will not be so weak until next spring." Wang Taishu smiled slightly. This smile made him look even more like a cunning old fox. "Why did you want to see me today?" Outside the carriage, Jing Mazong had started to drive. The carriage shook slightly. Ding Ning pulled out a cushion to lean against and said, "I heard that something major has happened in Chongling in the last few days." "You speak of Bai Shanshui?" Wang Taishu glanced at him, nodded and said, "You probably only learned today that Chongling has been turned upside down. Supposedly, the two prime ministers and the empress are unusually angry. Many of the Chongling officials have been removed from their posts and exiled, especially when Bai Shanshui was fighting and singing. His lyrics were too impudent, and he successfully escaped. The storm will probably grow." Ding Ning said, "Bai Shanshui acted, but there were no people around who could stop him from escaping Chongling. Do you know the inside story?" Wang Taishu said, "The Chongling guards were chasing some stolen items from the Imperial Mausoleum and forced out Fan Zhua and Bai Shanshui. At the time, Fan Zhua was in the caravan being investigated. He must not have been able to hide his identity as a powerful cultivator, so he acted and lured out Bai Shanshui. But the Chongling guards surrounded that caravan at the start. Such a coincidence. I fear there are secrets we do not know." Ding Ning frowned slightly and said, "Someone in Chongling must have wanted to scare Bai Shanshui away. But I heard that Bai Shanshui killed his way out of the Jiujiang Commandery meeting hall and escaped through the Wei River. With such cultivation, he should be much stronger than Zhao Zhan." Wang Taishu smiled and said, "Bai Shanshui was originally someone as famous as 4th Mr. Zhao. You didn't want to see me today to discuss Bai Shanshui's cultivation, did you?" Ding Ning glanced at him and asked, "What have you been doing recently?" Wang Taishu's expression became serious. He said seriously, "Actually, I'd like to hear your opinion on what I should do recently. Other people do not know, but I know very well that I was able to survive the battle with Jinlintang because of your schemes. Shui Wangsu told you when he took you into White Goat Cave that it was impossible to have more people pay for your brothers' lives. I think you will not do such a stupid thing." Ding Ning looked at him and said, "If it were me, I would definitely take advantage of this time to blackmail the military and take the opportunity to get more benefits. Especially now because of Bai Shanshui, the empress and the two prime ministers are furious. The military will want to keep the peace and will not dare to do anything out of line, especially after you experienced the assassination last time. They will be prepared this time. They should know that even if they kill you, many of their matters will be exposed by your subordinates. I really admire you. I feel more and more that even if those monsters of the legends can surpass you in cultivation speed, they will not have the vision to see through the clouds like you." Wang Taishu looked emotionally at Ding Ning. "I have caused the warden's office a great headache. I propose to do the treasury and mining business. It is right to demand an exorbitant price." Ding Ning was silent for a moment. "But you did not choose to leave Chongling, but to go higher. This means that you want to fight with the nobility who caused your brothers' deaths. The person who dared to control Jinlintang to do those things and was able to mobilize so many cultivators to kill me that night is either a general or a marquis." Wang Taishu coughed lightly. "Of course I can't touch such a person now, but those brothers of mine are really my hands and feet. Even if I am willing to cut off my hands and feet in exchange for them, they will not be able to come back alive. I hope that one day I can make the person who killed my brothers pay the price they deserve. Since you have done this, I want to ask you to help me do something." Ding Ning looked down and said softly. This undoubtedly did not match Ding Ning's initial attitude. From the start, Ding Ning did not want to have too much to do with two-level tower. Also, this matter should be very important to Ding Ning. Otherwise, he would not say it so seriously. So Wang Taishu was slightly puzzled. "What is it?" Ding Ning said slowly. "In the final stage of your discussion with the warden's office, see if you can get some business related to the prison." Wang Taishu stilled slightly. "Business related to the prison?" Ding Ning nodded. "It is best if you can enter and leave the prison and be familiar with the people in charge of the prison. Wang Taishu glanced at him and said, I will do my best. Ding Ning frowned slightly. Do you not feel that my request is strange? Do you not want to ask me why? You were able to reach energy refinement in a month and win in a competition like the Sword Trial Festival. You will definitely be someone who will do great things in the future. Wang Taishu laughed. Since we are both people who will do great things, it is not strange, no matter what we do. A carriage covered in snow passed through the alley and stopped outside the nameless wine shop in falling parasol. Ding Ning got off the carriage and waved goodbye to Jing Mazong and Wang Taishu. Pushing open the half-closed door, Zhang Sun Qianxue was waiting for him with a small oil lamp as usual. The food on the table seemed to have just come out of the steamer and was still steaming. Ding Ning saw that Zhang Sun Qianxue had changed into a new jacket. While it was the most common style on the streets, some of the most ordinary flower decorations seemed especially vivid and bright on her clothes. So when he sat down, he could not help but say, other people look good with their clothes, but you make them look good. Zhang Sun Qianxue did not care about his words and said coldly, Why are you sitting in Wang Taishu's carriage again? Ding Ning started to eat as he said, Because I have something I need his help with. Zhang Sun Qianxue did not ask further. This was a natural agreement she and Ding Ning had formed over many years. You really won the Sword Trial Festival? Seeing Ding Ning eating so happily, she also took a piece of sweet rice cake and slowly ate it, which was something she rarely did or had never done before. At the same time, she asked in an indifferent tone. Ding Ning made a sound of acknowledgement. He immediately took out a square wooden box from his sleeve and handed it to Zhang Sun Qianxue. Zhang Sun Qianxue did not need to look to know that the box contained the green suet jade that was very important to her. She did not immediately take the box. Instead, she looked at Ding Ning and said slowly, Thank you. Ding Ning said casually, There is no need to thank me between you and me. Zhang Sun Qianxue said coldly, This time is different from the past. You should know that after the last obstacle and this green suet jade, my sword will be stabilized. In the future, I will not have much reliance on you. If it was me, I may not give this green suet jade to you. This has nothing to do with me. Ding Ning looked up and licked his lips. He looked at her and said, Because in these years, I never thought of relying on you to do anything. Zhang Sun Qianxue frowned. In these years, other than cultivation, she rarely thought about other things. But she was not stupid. So she quickly realized that while she had great power compared to ordinary cultivators, Ding Ning had not relied on her to do anything in these years. He had not even asked her to protect him once. Ding Ning did not say anything. Tonight, you will sleep alone. Zhang Sun Qianxue inexplicably did not say anything else. She took the wooden box and walked towards the backyard. I owe you a favor. Ding Ning smiled bitterly. When she passed through the backyard and walked into the bedroom, snowflakes fell on Zhang Sun Qianxue's flawless face. Feeling the coldness of the snowflakes, Zhang Sun Qianxue felt more and more that the grievances of Chongling were too complicated. She did not think more. She pushed her chaotic thoughts out of her body and turned her mind into a blank sheet of paper again. Just like when she cultivated in the past, she lay down on the bed with her clothes on. The green suet jade in the square wooden box was emitting an extremely soft halo, and at the same time, it was emitting a faint fragrance that refreshed the mind. A strand of true essence seeped out from her fingertips and instantly crushed the green suet jade into powder. All of the powder entered her stomach along with her breath. When her consciousness sank into her energy sea and touched the blue sword in the Jade Palace, the sword once again became restless, like an imprisoned dragon. It gave off an incomparably ferocious aura, as if it wanted to forcibly pierce through her Jade Palace and then charge out of her body through her energy sea. However, waves of light green yuan qi continuously surged out of her body and sank into her energy sea. This light green energy that emitted a gentle halo constantly merged into the Jade Palace and into the blue sword. The blue sword slowly calmed down and started to truly accept the presence of her Jade Palace. Her mind started to merge into one with the sword. In the darkness, a faint blue flame flashed between her eyebrows, like a small blue sword. Chapter 90. Ding Ning silently sensed the changes in Zhongsun Qianxue's sword through the curtain. When the faint blue flame lit up on Zhongsun Qianxue's forehead, he knew that this sword would not harm her body in the future. She would be safer in Chongling in the future. But this also meant that he and Zhongsun Qianxue were even further apart. He closed his eyes and started to cultivate. His cultivation tonight was also different from usual. As countless tiny snowflakes fell on the roof tiles and gave off soft sounds that only cultivators could hear, his body also gave off soft sounds. All the little silkworms hidden in his body seemed to appear at the same time and became active. For any cultivator, there was only one place that could store physical energy, the energy sea of a cultivator. But at this time, the countless little silkworms in his body spat out tiny bursts of physical energy, like they were spitting out silk. This was truly thousands of streams forming an ocean. All of the space in his energy sea was slowly filled with physical energy, and there were countless tiny threads of physical energy flowing into his energy sea. His energy sea was swollen to the point of bursting. The tiny threads of physical energy that appeared inconceivable to ordinary cultivators in his body were stronger than the physical energy in his energy sea, and were still pressing in. Seeing that his energy sea was about to explode, with a thought from Ding Ning, the celestial aperture in his energy sea opened. A wave of physical energy flooded into his body at a speed that could not be reached in normal times. The rapidly flowing physical energy formed a rapid cycle in his body. Under the pressure of the energy sea that was still swollen to its limit, the tiny threads of physical energy merged completely with the physical energy that had been stored in his energy sea and became more condensed. Countless tiny sounds came from every bone in his body. The tiny threads of physical energy broke through the innermost membrane and started to nourish the marrow river in the deepest part of his bones. His 9-death silkworm divine art and 3 corpses non-self consciousness sutra cultivation became the same. The countless little silkworms in his body started to swallow back the physical energy and then quickly disappeared. His energy sea calmed, and his cultivation reached energy refinement first-class marrow transformation. In the cultivation methods of Chongling sects, the higher the cultivation, the better the physical energy or vital energy would nourish the body, and the longer the cultivator's lifespan would be. Yet when his energy sea calmed down, some new nether fire seemed to ignite in his 5 viscera. The energies of his 5 viscera were more vigorous and dry than before. The more vigorous the chi of the 5 viscera was, the faster the conversion of chi and true chi would be, and the faster the speed of cultivation would be. This meant that other than some mysteries unknown to the cultivators of the world, the 9-death silkworm divine art, the higher the cultivation, the faster the cultivation. This was an inconceivable matter. For all other methods in the world, the higher the cultivation, the slower the cultivation and breakthrough. Compared to Ding Ning's true cultivation, Ding Ning's progress was not fast. Many geniuses of the same age as him might have reached vital energy realm long ago and walked ahead of him. For example, An Baosher of Lingshu Sword Gate and Jing Liuli of Min Mountain Sword Sect. These 2 legendary monsters had only used a month to go from Realm 1 to Realm 2 energy refinement. But according to their records, they had used 8 months to go from Realm 2 energy refinement to Realm 3 vital energy realm. This speed was terrifying for ordinary cultivators, because ordinary cultivators would need at least several years to achieve this. Some people faced the same problem as Nangong Kaishu and could not even sense the primal energies of the universe, and ended up in Realm 2. However, compared to 1 month, 8 months was already 8 times the time. From Vital Energy Realm to Energy Fusion Realm, for ordinary cultivators, it was at least 8 times the time. At least 6 to 8 years. Then 8 times, it was at least 6 to 48 years. So most cultivators who did not have special encounters and did not have outstanding talent would at most reach Realm 5 Spirit Thought Realm in their lifetime. This was the true reason cultivators above Realm 6 were rare and cultivators above Realm 7 were grandmasters. The uniqueness of the 9-death silkworm divine art meant that Ding Ning could shorten the time in each realm. But the stronger the energies, the more the body could not replenish the energy, and he would overdraw on his lifespan. This was like burning one's lifespan in exchange for cultivation speed. So Zhang Sun Qianxue, who had sensed this characteristic a long time ago, concluded that this 9-death silkworm was a method that sought death. If they were like Nangong Kaishu and got stuck at a certain realm, the person who cultivated this method would not even be able to increase their cultivation speed and would die with a grievance. In the tallest temple of White Goat Cave, Xue Wangshu and Li Daoji faced the snowy valley. "You naturally did not want me to come to admire the snow with you." Li Daoji was silent for a long time and said, "Say what you want to say. Being wishy-washy is Zhang Yi's personality, not yours. Today, I wrote a letter to the Helan Commandery Governor of the Northern Lands. You will depart tomorrow. When you arrive, he should have seen my letter." Xue Wangshu did not turn to look at Li Daoji, and only looked at the snowflakes spinning in the wind as he spoke softly. Li Daoji did not turn to look at Xue Wangshu, and was silent. Xue Wangshu said gently, "His Majesty will be furious about Bai Shanshui's matter. While you are not from Wei, you are from Han and in White Goat Cave. You may be involved." Li Daoji's eyebrows rose like two small swords. He said coldly, "As long as White Goat Cave has you, even if Bai Shanshui's matter causes a storm, I will not have to leave Chongling and avoid the north. Since we have known each other for so long, it is time to part. Say what you have to say. There is no meaning in using this excuse to avoid me." Xue Wangshu smiled embarrassedly, like a child whose lie was exposed. "There does not seem to be any meaning." His smile immediately disappeared. He said seriously, "Maybe White Goat Cave is too small. I have been here for so many years, but have never seen a genius as talented as Ding Ning. I have never seen the two legendary monsters of Lingshu Sword Gate and Min Mountain Sword Sect. I do not know how they compare to Ding Ning. But Ding Ning defeated Su Qin. I am certain that if he is given enough time, his future accomplishments will surpass mine. I am too old. No matter how much I cherish my life, if I use up all my remaining time, I will not even be able to cross a small realm, much less a major realm. It is better to take him forward." Li Daoji sank into silence again. If he was Xue Wangshu, he would make the same choice. But after leaving this temple, he knew he may never see this white-haired old man again. When people meet, there will be a time to part. My senior sect brother and I are the same. I have endured my entire life. I showed my cultivation on the road outside Chongling and acted presumptuously once. I always felt it was not enough. Fortunately, senior sect brother brought me Ding Ning. Doing some unbridled things will have meaning." Xue Wangshu smiled and said a few words. He reached out and grasped the small white jade sword that had always been hanging at his waist. Li Daoji suddenly realized something. He suddenly turned around and wanted to say something. "Look at this sword." But Xue Wangshu shook his head at him, indicating for him to not speak and look forward. Then Xue Wangshu swung his sword. A ball of white sword chi surged from the body of the sword to the tip of the sword. The powerful primal energies of the universe suddenly tore open a completely pure space in the snowy sky ahead. Then a snowy white curved goat horn appeared in this space. It was a simple white goat hanging horns, the most ordinary sword move in the White Goat Sword Manual. You have to remember. Xue Wangshu looked with satisfaction at the snowy white sword energy. He said softly and solemnly to Li Daoji, "White goat hanging horn. The most important thing is not the horn, but forbearance and balance. I do not know if you remember, but the first day you entered White Goat Cave, I took you to see the white goats fighting in the mountains." Li Daoji closed his eyes. He tried to recall, and finally a scene he had forgotten for a long time appeared in his mind. In the scene, two curved horned goats were fighting. One of them faced an opponent who was clearly fiercer. It only stood firm and used the thickest part of its horn to block the other's attacks. It did not even counterattack. The other's vicious attacks even broke off one of its horns. Yet it only managed to hold on. The broken horn stabbed into the opponent's head. Li Daoji took a deep breath. He opened his eyes and finally understood the true meaning of white goat hanging horn. Shui Wangxu looked at him and knew he had understood. He smiled in satisfaction and handed the small white jade sword in his hand to Li Daoji. Li Daoji took the sword, knelt in front of Shui Wangxu, bowed 3 times, and then stood to leave. He did not say anything else. The slightly red hilt of the large sword in front of his chest moved further away in the wind and snow until it disappeared from Shui Wangxu's sight. Chapter 91. Snow had fallen in Chongling, and snow had just started to appear in Guangzhou. Morning, Guangzhou's Qi Mountain. In the vast fields, a youth was practicing the sword. His sword was purple like Su Qin's sword, but the seal scripts on the surface were gold. Rumble. As he slashed with his sword, a true golden lightning suddenly appeared in the cold air. This golden lightning landed on the ground in front of him. Yellow dirt flew, and clumps of wild grass started to burn. The young man turned around, his handsome face filled with an indescribable determination and sternness. "Uncle Jean." He put away his sword and said in a cold voice to a slightly fat middle-aged man sitting on an ox cart, "I still have to go to Chongling." The middle-aged man, he called Uncle Jean, sighed softly. "For Xiero. I do not blame Xiero. While she knows I fell in love with her at first sight, we are not engaged." This youth looked in the direction of Chongling. "Originally, I only felt that the Thunder Firmament sword manual at home was stronger than many of the sword manuals in Chongling, and that I did not need to go to Chongling to learn. But now I think I was wrong. Chongling does not just have secret cultivation manuals, but also many wonderful things. I am going to challenge that Ding Ning. I believe that if I can defeat Ding Ning, Xiero will change her mind." The middle-aged man smiled slightly. "If that is the case, then we will depart today. Otherwise, it will be hard to travel when it snows in Guangzhou." The large and small fields of Chongling's warden's office had accumulated a knuckle of snow. Yugu walked alone into a field filled with tiger wolf army flags. In the center of the field, there was a tall old man dressed in metal clothing. Yugu's golden energy was very strong, but he could not compare to this old man. That old man just stood there coldly, but had the presence of swallowing mountains and rivers, and holding tens of thousands of soldiers. "General Sikong." Yugu walked behind him and bowed to listen. "The negotiations with that gangster of Chongling must end as soon as possible." The old man in metal armor did not look back. He said in a metallic voice, "The bottom line is the clearing of Chongling storehouses, transportation, and the purchase of armor." Yugu's pupils shrunk in disbelief. His voice was slightly cold as he said, "General, he's just a commoner. How can he be considered a hero? Isn't it too much to agree to such conditions? The times create ambitious and ruthless people. Coincidentally, he is an ambitious and ruthless person." The old man said in a deep voice, "The Divinity Bureau has already used this opportunity to investigate the warden's office. The Empress has already revealed her intentions of transferring Fong Xiang back to command the Chongling Guards. If we don't end this as soon as possible, there will be more scandals. You should know the consequences." Yugu's expression instantly turned ugly. He and everyone else in the warden's office were naturally loyal to the Qin dynasty and the Yuanwu Emperor. However, the Yuanwu Emperor naturally could not rely solely on one person. When the Yuanwu Emperor ascended the throne, he was forced to rely too much on the power of the Empress family. In the last decade, the 2 ministers and the bureaus had done their best to change the situation. The stronger the emperor's control over the Qin dynasty, the less he needed to rely on one power. The entire Qin dynasty would be stronger, and its progress would be more powerful. This was not just a matter related to the future of many people in the warden's office. "I know what to do." Yugu took a deep breath and said, "I will have this matter end as soon as possible." Yet, just as he was about to turn and leave, the old man in front of him said heavily, "Gangsters have their own ways of doing things. They have many methods we cannot imagine to investigate things. Since the Divinity Bureau is afraid of responsibility and is pressuring us, when you go to negotiate with this gangster, have him help investigate who used the Chongling Guards." Ding Ning woke up in the morning as usual and helped Zhang Sun Qianxue make porridge. Then he carried his most commonly used bowl to a nearby noodle shop to make noodles. When he walked in front of this noodle shop filled with steam and oil, Ding Ning, who had not decided what to eat today, stilled. An old man with a greasy white beard held a bowl of noodles and smiled at him. It was Xue Wangshu. "Why have you come?" Ding Ning looked at this proud old man in shock. "I want to take you to a place." Xue Wangshu drank a mouthful of noodle soup and said with a smile, "No wonder the people here like to come to this noodle shop to eat noodles. The noodles here are good. Even the spiciness is so chewy. You are just eating noodles. Why did you bring your own bowl?" Ding Ning looked at him and said hesitantly, "You really want me to say the reason?" Xue Wangshu looked strangely at him and then at the crude porcelain bowl in his hand. "Would it be more fragrant if you eat it in this bowl?" Ding Ning looked sympathetically at him. "No, it is because while their noodles are delicious, I know the person who washes the dishes. He is not very good at washing dishes, and he likes to pick his nose halfway through." Xue Wangshu stilled. Looking at the remaining half of the noodle soup, his expression was unusually spectacular. "If you want to eat more, I can lend you a bowl," Ding Ning said. Xue Wangshu shook his head. "No, some things are just for the moment. It will not taste like that after a while." Ding Ning walked into the shop and put the bowl next to the noodle pot. After thinking, he ordered a bowl of noodles with red soup and spicy cabbage and meat slices. As he watched the meat slices and the spiciness stir-fry in the oil, he asked Xue Wangshu, "Where are you taking me?" Xue Wangshu said, "We are going to Zhushan district of Ba Commandery." Ding Ning stilled. "Why are we going so far?" Xue Wangshu said, "There is a very lively temple fair there. We will make it in time if we go now. It will be very interesting." The thin slices of meat had been stir-fried with the red oil and spiciness. Then the pickled cabbage was added. After stir-frying, it was spread over the snow-like noodles. Ding Ning did not immediately pick up the bowl of noodles. Instead, he frowned. Just like how Li Daoji had scolded Xue Wangshu last night, he said softly, "Can you not use such a clumsy excuse? No matter how good your mood, you cannot travel so far to see a temple fair on a snowy day. Eat noodles, eat noodles." Xue Wangshu pointed at Ding Ning's noodle bowl and reminded him. Then he said, "I am going to get something." Ding Ning picked up the noodle bowl and sat down across from him. "What is it?" Xue Wangshu glanced at him and said, "Something to cure your illness." Ding Ning started to eat the noodles. When he finished the steaming bowl of noodles and only the soup was left, he looked up and said, "Fang Shimu told me that nothing can cure my illness unless I can enter Min Mountain Sword Sect to cultivate and comprehend the heaven-replenishing divine art. This is the true reason you had Wang Taishu arrange for you to enter White Goat Cave? Because White Goat Cave and the Green Vine Sword Academy have merged, we have the qualifications to attend the Min Mountain Sword Trials." Xue Wangshu looked calmly at Ding Ning's eyes and said, "Fang Shimu is correct, but nothing is absolute. You are still too weak to attend next year's Min Mountain Sword Trials. Based on past years, most of the disciples that the sects send to attend the Min Mountain Sword Trials are at least vital energy realm. Sometimes, there are even those monsters who have reached energy fusion realm. You are smarter than Zhang, Yi, and the others. You should know that those attending the Min Mountain Sword Trials are not just students from ordinary cultivation places, but also members of noble families." Xue Wangshu paused and then said, "They are more terrifying than the students of ordinary cultivation places. Many of them do not have the ability to pass Min Mountain Sword Sects tests immediately, but need time to be nurtured by their families. In the first few years of cultivation, their families can give them more resources so they can cultivate faster. For those noble families, Min Mountain Sword Sect is not the only way to climb up, but a powerful aid in their cultivation. I already understood what you said when I entered White Goat Cave." Ding Ning glanced at Xue Wangshu and said with a frown, "But I also know that Ba Commandery's Zhushan district is not an ordinary place." Xue Wangshu glanced at him and said, "Isn't it just that there are more Zheng people?" Ding Ning did not back down and looked back at him. He said, "Of course you know that it is not just the Zheng who have more people. Shui Wangshu was slightly angry and said, I am the cave master of White Goat Cave, your teacher. I am telling you to come with me. Why are you not coming? You misunderstand my meaning. Ding Ning looked at his trembling white beard and said, in reality, I also want to go to that place, but I am worried about your safety. Shui Wangshu's brows immediately relaxed, and he looked disdainfully at Ding Ning. I am about to die of old age. Can't you let me have some glory before I die? Ding Ning took a deep breath. He looked up at the white snow on the roof. After a moment of silence, he said softly, a moment of pleasure is not glory, but if the students of White Goat Cave can win in the Min Mountain Sword Trials, they must have slapped many people's faces for you. Is that not glory? Of course, it is true glory. Shui Wangshu laughed happily. If there is such a day, even if I die of old age, I think I will die smiling. Ding Ning turned to look at him and shook his head. What I mean is, even if you're going to die of old age, do not die so quickly. I also want to live longer. Shui Wangshu stilled and then laughed like a child. He reached out and patted Ding Ning and said, Deal. Chapter 92. After the snow, Chongling became bone-chillingly cold. Even though snow was no longer falling from the sky, the snow between the roof tiles and in the dark places did not melt easily. In the end, they grew harder and turned into ice shells mixed with specks of dust. There were not many people walking through the Divinity Bureau. Many of the paths were covered in snow that could not be melted. Footprints of varying depths were imprinted on the light gray ice shells. The people who had left these footprints were nowhere to be found, and added to the dark atmosphere of the Divinity Bureau. Occasionally, there would be a few screams that seemed to have their mouths gagged. They couldn't even scream in a carefree manner. They would faintly come out from the cracks in the doors of some of the houses. They would reverberate through the streets and then quickly disappear. Chief Inspector Chen, dressed in deep red robes, looked dispirited from beginning to end. He slowly walked on the path covered in snow, giving people the feeling of a wilted pomegranate. It was hard to associate him with the powerful nobility of the Qin dynasty. The old, deaf and mute servant who had been driving the carriage for him was waiting at the gates of the Divinity Bureau. He did not give any orders, and the old servant did not make any gestures. After he boarded the carriage started to drive aimlessly through the streets of Chongling. Sitting in the crude carriage, Chief Inspector Chen had his head bowed slightly, as though he was asleep. But at a certain moment, he slowly looked up and lifted the curtain. This carriage without any markings was moving into the shadows of a tall wall. When he lifted the curtain, many waves of primal energies of the universe silently seeped out of his body. There wasn't even the slightest sound of wind. Layers of crystal-like brilliance quickly gathered around his body, as if forming countless mirrors, refracting the surrounding light rays. He wore a deep red robe, but even if people passed by, they would only see the curtain being blown open by the wind, and not see him walking out of the carriage. At this moment, he seemed to be transparent. Then he floated up, passed over the tall wall, and landed in the courtyard. The courtyard was a withered garden under the winter snow. Chief Inspector Chen passed through the garden and walked into the corridor. At this time, the crystal-like brilliance that had gathered around his body slowly disappeared, and his figure slowly emerged from the air like a ghost. He walked along the corridor and finally entered the inner courtyard. He stopped in front of a study. He did not deliberately disguise his footsteps. In this study, there was a middle-aged man with a long beard who looked like a scholar. He wore a gray cotton robe and was originally grinding ink, about to write a letter. However, because of the cold weather, the ink had not completely melted. This middle-aged bearded man heard the unfamiliar footsteps, but he did not stop grinding ink. Even though he knew this was an inexplicable guest, in his eyes, only a rare few people in Chongling could pose a threat to him. But how could those few important people who could pose a threat appear in front of him in such a manner? So when Chief Inspector Chen's footsteps stopped, he sneered and said, "It is cold outside. Since you have come, do not wait outside." Hearing the words from the study, Chief Inspector Chen's expression did not change. He did not even make any extra movements. The door to the study in front of him was pushed open by his presence. The middle-aged bearded man narrowed his eyes slightly and was about to say something. But when he saw Chief Inspector Chen's deep red robe and sensed the strange presence mixed with decadence and darkness, his proud expression suddenly froze. You are the Divinity Bureau." Cold energy surged out of his body and caused his tongue to stiffen. "I am." Bureau Chief Chen spat out these 3 words. The middle-aged bearded man immediately paled. "I know you are a very special middleman." Chief Inspector Chen looked coldly at him and said slowly and clearly, "There are some cultivators in the military and the outer commanderies who want to live good lives. They may have places where they need to spend money on their cultivation. But since there is no war, they cannot accumulate merit, receive rewards, or transfer orders. However, they had very good fighting strength. Some of them would kill for others. Some of the nobility in Chongling need people to kill for them. It is best if it is not connected to them." Thinking of the legends about this mysterious chief of the Divinity Bureau, the middle-aged bearded man broke out in a cold sweat and flowed down his face. But he still said strongly, "No matter what you say, it has nothing to do with me because you do not have evidence." "You are right. I have no evidence." Chief Inspector Chen looked down coldly. The middle-aged man suddenly realized something. His eyes were instantly filled with disbelief. A ball of light burst out from his hand like the rising sun. It emitted an abnormally terrifying aura that was about to blow up the entire study room. However, it was also at this moment that his mind suddenly became dizzy, and his vision became blurry. Every movement of his body became abnormally slow due to the dizziness of his thoughts. A deep red sword light flew out of Chief Inspector Chen's deep red sleeve and gently stabbed at his heart. The middle-aged bearded man's mind immediately cleared. However, a chill spread from his heart meridian. Looking at the crimson sword light that was retracted into his sleeve, the power in his body quickly faded like the tide. The sun-like brilliance in his hand was just a hair away, unable to penetrate his palm.
Why?
The middle-aged bearded man could not understand what method this legendary chief of the Divinity Bureau had used to make his mind lose focus in an instant. He also could not understand why the other dared to kill him without any evidence. "There is no why," Chief Inspector Chen said coldly, "but you do not understand me because I never do things according to the rules." The middle-aged bearded man covered his heart and slowly sat down. He was in great pain and said in puzzlement, "You are the chief of the Divinity Bureau, and you monitor the officials according to the laws of the Qin dynasty. Is it not a heavier crime for someone like you to not follow the rules? Even if you do not follow the rules, why do you want to kill me? Why don't you want to learn something from me? People in our position can survive in Chongling only because of our loyalty to the Qin dynasty and His Majesty, and not because of our crimes." Chief Inspector Chen looked at him who refused to die and said coldly, "What I learned from you is not absolute evidence for those important people. What I need is to make the situation more chaotic. If people are chaotic, they will make mistakes for me to catch." The middle-aged bearded man was in even more pain. He groaned and made a strange sound from his throat. "Then why me? Why me? Because of your identity?" Chief Inspector Chen looked expressionlessly at him and said, "Because you are not a member of the military. Even if I kill you, the military will not pay attention. Unless it is a military official related to you, he will use the power of the military to investigate this matter. He might want to know which power did this. As long as he investigates, I might be able to find out who he is." The middle-aged bearded man exhaled his last breath. He fell forward on the desk and died in pain. Powerful primal energies of the universe once again came out of Chief Inspector Chen's body. His body once again became transparent and disappeared in the air. He passed over the tall wall and walked through the streets as though he was transparent. People passed by along the way and did not notice his existence at all. He walked through several streets and alleys, lifted the curtain of the carriage that was still moving slowly, and sat in the carriage as if nothing had happened. Each day, he seemed to be sitting in this carriage driven by the deaf and mute old servant and patrolling through the streets of Chongling. He would occasionally give an order, but did nothing else. Yet, just now, in the deep-walled courtyard he had left, more blood flowed out of the chest of the middle-aged bearded man who had fallen dead on the desk. In the end, it covered the entire table and flowed down the corners to the ground. At the same time, Ding Ning was also in the moving carriage. As Chief Inspector Chen slowly turned the primal energies of the universe around him into nothingness and then thought with his head bowed, Ding Ning was also thinking with his head bowed. He was not unfamiliar with Ba Commandery's Zhushan district. The wealthiest and most powerful family in Zhushan district was the Feng family. The Feng family was also among the flowers on the wall of his wine shop. Chapter 93. Ba Commandery's Zhushan district was a very special place. It even had another name, Zheng City. In the war between the Qin dynasty and the Han, Zhao, and Wei dynasties, the first to be destroyed was a small country, Zheng. Zheng's territory was only equivalent to one of the Qin dynasty's present commanderies. It was weak and located at a strategic location. Even though the Zheng monarch had opened the gates and allowed the Qin dynasty's army to pass through, in the end, the Qin dynasty found an excuse to destroy it because the movements of the Qin dynasty's army could be easily grasped, and it was inconvenient to station troops there. Most of the young and strong men of Zheng were forced to do hard labor to build reservoirs and canals to irrigate the fields. When the Qin dynasty established Ba Commandery, most of the people of Zheng were driven to Ba Commandery by an edict to open up new land. Most of the people of Zheng who had experienced the pain of losing their country, the pain of hard labor, the dangers of traveling through mountains and rivers, and the poison of the snakes and insects of Ba Mountain had grown old. Their descendants settled down in Ba Commandery. Most of the residents of Ba Commandery's Zhushan district were descendants of Zheng. Because it had been a generation, the descendants of the Zheng had accepted their fate of becoming Qin people. However, many of the customs of Zheng were still passed on. Perhaps because they did not feel safe under the threat of a great country, the Zheng people were especially respectful of ghosts and gods. In a year, there would be many sacrifices and temple fairs to the ghosts and gods. At the beginning, the lively temple fairs that Shui Wangxiu and Ding Ning spoke of were the temple fairs where the Zheng people worshipped the kitchen god. The Feng family of Ba Commandery's Zhushan district were not Zheng people. When the Yuanwu emperor ascended the throne and needed the people of the Bazin Kendo ground to show their loyalty, all the Bazin Kendo ground disciples who had shown their absolute loyalty to the emperor through their actions, regardless of whether they were of high cultivation or just ordinary outer sect disciples, had all survived. Feng Qianzhua of the Feng family had been an ordinary disciple of the Bazin Kendo ground in the past. The reason the Feng family had been able to live well in Ba Commandery and even become a small marquis was because of another fact that many people were unwilling and did not dare to mention. The most noble woman of the Qin dynasty, the Empress, was from the state of Zheng. Like the mistress of the Guanzhong Xie family, Empress Zheng Xiu's family was a noble family that had developed in Chongling. Zheng Xiu was born, studied, and cultivated in Chongling. However, the people of the Zheng were still the people of the Zheng. Even if she had ascended to the position of empress, it had taken a lot of bloodshed just now. In the bloodiest years before the Yuanwu emperor ascended the throne, everything she showed made people feel that she was a true Qin person and had no special sympathy for the Zheng people. Yet when the situation in Chongling stabilized and she became the high and mighty empress, many people found that she, who was cold and emotionless in many matters, had some softness to the people of her country. Some officials who were gentle in dealing with the Zheng people would receive some preferential treatment. When the Zheng people were forced to move to Ba Commandery, the Feng family had been very lenient to the Zheng people. Adding on what the Feng family had done when the Bazin Kendo ground was destroyed, the Feng family quickly became the most prestigious family in Zhushan district after the Yuanwu emperor ascended the throne. They had jurisdiction over the nearby copper and tin mines, and were deeply respected by the Zheng people in Zhushan district. What is the medicine you say in Ba Commandery's Zhushan district that can cure me? Ding Ning asked Shui Wangxiu amidst the monotonous sound of the wheels grinding over the thin ice on the road. It is a Dingyan bead. Because there was enough time, Shui Wangxu was not in a hurry. He spoke slowly as though he was telling a story. The Dingyan bead I speak of is not the undesirable fragrance pills made from pollen and nectar in the fragrance shops of Chongling, but an ancient pill bead that truly has the effect of preserving one's appearance. After His Majesty ascended the throne, stopped fighting, and did not restrict outsiders from moving into Chongling, Chongling is now the greatest city in the world. While the Ba Mountains have commanderies now, compared to Chongling, it is still a dangerous place. But you may know that a long time ago, there were many cultivation sects in the Ba Mountains. In the past, there were many spirit veins in the Ba Mountains. Those spirit veins were much stronger than the spirit veins of White Goat Cave. So many sects were born there. Even now, while the spirit veins have been used up, there are still the remains of many sects in the Ba Mountains. In the second year after His Majesty ascended the throne, my senior sect brother happened to be traveling in the Ba Mountains and coincidentally found the remains of an ancient sect. Many cultivators went to search for treasures, and my senior sect brother found a Dingyan bead. The medicinal energy coming out of the Dingyan bead has the effect of nourishing the organs and maintaining one's appearance. But after my senior sect brother found this Dingyan bead, he was robbed by another cultivator. That cultivator was Feng Qianzhua of the Feng family in Ba Commandery's Zhushan district. My senior sect brother fought against him and was not a match. He took the Dingyan bead. Hearing these words, Ding Ning unconsciously shook his head. His gaze landed on the last flower remnant sword. He could not help but think of Zhongsun Qianxue's words against him entering White Goat Cave. Chongling was a place where countless grievances gathered. Just like now. This remnant sword originally had no connection to White Goat Cave or Shui Wangshu, but invisibly, this sword had inexplicably entangled many grievances. In those years, my cultivation was not much higher than senior sect brothers. I may not be able to defeat an opponent my senior sect brother could not defeat. Shui Wangshu glanced at Ding Ning and said calmly, also, that Dingyan bead could be refined. My senior sect brother, and I naturally thought that the other had refined the Dingyan bead after taking it. Also, the Feng family had some connections to the Empress family, so we could only swallow our anger and not think about this matter. But later, you found that he did not refine this Dingyan bead? Ding Ning saw something in his eyes and asked. Shui Wangshu shook his head disdainfully. Only many years ago did I hear that Feng Qianzhua liked beauty, so this Dingyan bead was given to his concubines. Ding Ning frowned and also said mockingly, then he can be considered loyal. Most people like beauty. People who value appearance so much will only look at a face. No matter how beautiful that face is, they will soon be tired of it. Shui Wangshu laughed. He would get tired of it, so he gave that Dingyan bead to his 3 concubines. This way, before he gets tired of it, the concubines he likes can maintain their beauty. Ding Ning sneered. A very good idea, but it was not used in cultivation. Actually, after cultivating for a long time, you will think about the meaning. Shui Wangshu looked at Ding Ning and said seriously, when you feel that it is impossible to progress further, and you do not want to make achievements and fight on the battlefield, you will feel that there is no meaning in cultivation. It is better to spend the rest of your life with good wine and beautiful concubines. Ding Ning grew silent. He knew that Shui Wangshu spoke the truth, but Feng Qianzhua owed him a debt. So, in his view, even if Feng Qianzhua felt that cultivation was meaningless, he was not worthy of such a life of luxury and beautiful concubines. For you, cultivation is of course meaningful. Shui Wangshu looked at the silent Ding Ning and smiled slightly. For me, I have been silent for a lifetime. The final glory makes me feel better than 100 beautiful concubines. So you do not feel that you owe me anything. Also, you have to fight for victory in the Min Mountain Sword Trials. Even if you say that I am obsessed, even if White Goat Cave no longer exists, if a student from White Goat Cave can enter the top 3 in the Min Mountain Sword Trials, I will be happier than anything. Just imagining the possibilities and the various expressions on the faces of those nobles makes me very happy. Ding Ning looked at his excited face and the smile on Shui Wangshu's face. He could not help but imagine such a scene. He felt happy and could not help but smile. He said, "I do not feel that you are obsessed because White Goat Cave is just a famous official to many people, but for you it is a lifetime. But I heard that the Min Mountain Sword Trials are different from the small-scale sword trials of our Greenvine Sword Academy. The top 3 are divided into first and second. So just entering the top 3 is not the happiest thing. If you want to fight, you have to fight for first place." Shui Wangshu stilled slightly. He saw absolute confidence from Ding Ning's smile and calm gaze. His hand almost broke off several strands of his white beard. "You want to fight for first place? Even though I have said so much to you, you still have such confidence?" Shui Wangshu shook his head and then breathed out and laughed. "If you can really take first place, I will go wild as a youth and run naked around the famous Sword River in front of Min Mountain Sword Sect. I will take first place," Ding Ning said confidently and then looked strangely at Shui Wangshu. "Did you like to run naked when you were young? Do you have such a strange hobby?" Shui Wangshu laughed out loud and slapped the cushion with both hands, as if he had really returned to his youth. Young and frivolous, singing and drinking, who knows how many frivolous things. But after so many years, so many things were wrong, so many people left, but it is hard to turn back, and there is no chance to start over. Hearing Shui Wangshu's voice, Ding Ning closed his eyes and said softly inside, "Old man, while you are past your prime, I will follow you and give you true glory." Chapter 94. As time passed, the winter grew thicker. When they entered the Ba Commandery, the scenery along the way was completely different from Chongling. They could see that most of the low hills had been turned into terraced fields. There were small towns everywhere, but it was rare to see a large city. The steep peaks of the Ba Mountains stood shoulder to shoulder, like giants. Even now, there were few people in those places. Thousands of years ago, there were very few cultivators in the world. Cultivators who could comprehend the path or obtain some cultivation paths were people like Earth Immortals and Sword Immortals in the eyes of ordinary people. These people used the spirit veins to cultivate in the mountains. They were thought to eat the wind and dew, swallow the clouds, and left behind countless legends. When the countries of the world slowly grew strong and formed dynasties, the Qin dynasty and the Bazin Kendo ground rose. The Ba Mountains were set up as commanderies. While the population increased greatly, the spirit veins in the Ba Mountains had been cut off for hundreds of years. The ancient cultivation places inside seemed to have been eliminated and disappeared for many years. Even now, the Bazin Kendo ground had fallen in the storm of the Yuanwu Emperor's ascension. Compared to Chongling, which was densely populated with cultivators, there were very few cultivators in the Ba Commandery. Ordinary mountain people's understanding of cultivators was about the same as before. They felt that cultivators were immortals who ate the wind and dew and swallowed the clouds. So, along the way, Shui Wangshu only needed to show some of his skills to easily switch to the best horses. Naturally, they did not travel slowly. This day, when Ding Ning lifted the curtain of the carriage that had been frozen hard by the ice, he saw a large village made of thousands of wooden buildings built along the slope. He knew that this was the Lianqing village. Before the Ba Mountains had been officially set up as commanderies, and before there were any garrisons, this was one of the largest gathering places of the Ba Mountain people. After passing through here and a valley, there was a basin. That was where Zhushan District was. Just as Ding Ning followed Shui Wangshu and neared Zhushan District, Wang Taishu and Yu Gu were having a meeting in the warden's office station on the outskirts of Chongling. Most of the time, Yu Gu's gaze was still on the wintersweet tree in the courtyard. His expression was still dignified and cold, but inside, he was truly calm. This was because he knew extremely well that based on the progress of the past few days, this negotiation that the warden's office needed to conclude as soon as possible would be concluded today. The cold air is already thick. If someone suddenly takes over the matter of the armor, it might be delayed. Wang Taishu's gaze also stopped on the wax plum tree. He said unhurriedly, "So what General said before is reasonable. Two-level tower does not need the business of making armor, but we must have the business of opening warehouses. Other than this, I heard that many of Chongling's prisons have not been maintained for a long time, and the prisoners need to wear clothes in the cold. I fear that they will need some help. I think General can make the decision for two-level tower to do these matters. Yugu suddenly turned around. A sharp glint shot out from his eyes as he looked straight at Wang Taishu and said in a deep voice, "Are you serious?" This was completely out of his expectations. The repairs of the prisons, prison food, clothing, and some other matters. While there were great benefits in these, how could they compare to the astounding profits of making armor for the army? Wang Taishu smiled and said, "Even though I'm just a commoner and can't compare to a general whose orders are as high as a mountain, I can still keep my word." Yugu glanced at him and immediately misunderstood. He said with slight disdain, "To be able to enter the prisons, even if the people of two-level tower enter in the future, I think they will receive good care. Even the ghosts used as scapegoats will feel much more comfortable in there. The other gangsters of Chongling will have to think carefully before they oppose you. Their people will not have good days in there. Wang Taishu, you are retreating in order to advance. Offend the warden's office less, and in the future, you will be able to take more territory in the fight against those gangsters. Your plan is not bad." Wang Taishu smiled slightly again and bowed humbly to Yugu. He said, "Thank you, General Yu, for your help." Yugu's expression turned slightly cold. Of course, he had not agreed, but Wang Taishu knew he would agree. He would agree. Getting the Clan Law Bureau to give some benefits was a minor matter for the warden's office. Wang Taishu's request did not touch the bottom line of the warden's office, and could even be said to have given the warden's office a lot of face. Yet, whether on the battlefield or in court, he was wary and disliked people who were too smart and could see the thoughts of their opponents. So in this moment, his eyes were filled with true murderousness. "While I can satisfy some of your requests this time, you are a smart person. You should understand how the situation will change after this period of time." Yugu took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. He said in a slightly cold voice, "After this winter, it is best if you restrain yourself." Wang Taishu still bowed and said respectfully in a soft voice, "I will remember General's teachings." Yugu was silent. This negotiation that had been going on for a long time finally came to an end. While Wang Taishu's posture and words were so humble, he knew that after walking out of this relay station, with the promise and cooperation of the military, Wang Taishu's two-level tower would quickly force the dozens of gangster gangs that relied on business to have nowhere to go, or be forced to merge into two-level tower. Two-level tower, which was already very powerful, would become an enormous entity that the other gangsters could not compare to, except for the underground ruler of Fish Market. Because it was only half a day's journey from Lianqing Stockade to Zhushan District, after asking for Ding Ning's opinion, Shui Wangshu and Ding Ning did not rest at Lianqing Stockade. They only ate some food and continued on their journey. "We will soon reach Zhushan District. Do you have a plan?" Ding Ning asked Shui Wangshu as he rubbed his knees that were slightly uncomfortable from sitting for a long time. He had always been a very scheming person. For example, killing Song Shinshu, when to appear in front of Xie Chongsheng and the others, and when to enter the cultivation places to attend the Min Mountain Sword trials. He had many meticulous plans and alternative plans. Originally, he would have done these things step by step. After entering Min Mountain Sword School, he would obtain the heaven-replenishing divine art that could work with the 9-death silkworm, prevent premature aging, and increase his cultivation speed. After obtaining the heaven-replenishing divine art, he could find the people on the wall one by one according to his cultivation and deal with them. But Song Shunshu had told him some secrets that disrupted his plans. Some things had to be done at the same time. The Feng family of Zhushan District had not been part of his initial plans. Feng Qianzhua is like a lord of the land in Zhushan District. Because he is a powerful cultivator, many people in the area think of him as a god that can protect an area. Shui Wangshu looked at the busy Ding Ning and explained. He probably enjoys this kind of love. So, every year, during temple fairs like this, he will appear, offer incense, donate some goods, and say a few words. At that time, if I challenge him in public, he should not be able to find a reason to refuse. Ding Ning said, In any other place of the dynasty, everyone respects the brave and strong. They will admire both sides who publicly challenge each other. But in Jushan district, you are too hateful to challenge him in such a setting. Shui Wangshu said with slight disdain, if you can win, it is not hate, but fear. Ding Ning said calmly, even if you are certain he has not entered Realm 7, the Bazin Kendo ground has some unique methods. Of course, I will be careful. Shui Wangshu took a drink from the water bag and looked seriously at Ding Ning. But you say you want to suppress all the young geniuses in the Min Mountain Sword trials. What is your plan? I have not seen you practice the sword on the way here. Have you comprehended the 2 sword manuals you chose? Ding Ning hesitated for a moment and then nodded. Shui Wangshu almost choked on a mouthful of water and coughed violently. Ding Ning glanced at him and casually used his finger to make a few gestures in the air. While it was just a simple count, there seemed to be many unique sounds forming in the air. Shui Wangshu stopped coughing but pulled off several strands of his beard. Much of the water in the uncovered water bag spilled out and soaked the front of his robes. I know these sword manuals are difficult for other people, but they are simple for me. Ding Ning looked calmly at him and said softly, so my plan is to enter Vital Energy Realm before the Min Mountain Sword trials. If it is safer, I will reach at least Vital Energy Realm's 2nd class cultivation. I have never seen a monster like you before. A long time later, Shui Wangshu sighed softly and said slowly, I suddenly want to see the 2 most powerful monsters of Min Mountain Sword Sect and Lingshu Sword Gate. I want to see how different they are from you. Originally, I thought the Wildfire Sword Manual was not difficult enough, but you are like this even with these 2 sword manuals. It seems I do not understand you enough. The shock in Shui Wangshu's eyes subsided, but his brows were slightly furrowed as he asked in a soft voice, then these 2 are enough? Some people in the Min Mountain Sword trials may have stronger sword manuals. Ding Ning shook his head. There is no strongest sword manual, only stronger people. Chapter 95. So arrogant. Shui Wangshu shouted in a mocking tone. But so daring. Then he said emotionally, I remember that person also said something like this. Ding Ning's gaze flashed. He thought and said, I want to hear your evaluation of that person. It seems that while you are young, you have heard of that person's story. Shui Wangshu's expression grew serious. He looked at Ding Ning and said seriously, when His Majesty ascended the throne, people came to ask how to evaluate that person. I replied that I could not evaluate that person because I did not qualify to do so. Also, I will not evaluate that person to anyone because I know His Majesty is wise and powerful. His Majesty can make the Qin dynasty stronger. All the cultivation sects in Chongling need a stronger Qin dynasty to be able to live in the world. Up to today, everything has become a story. Shui Wangshu slowly said, so, I will not evaluate these stories of the past in front of you. Other than the above reasons, I do not want my emotions and thoughts to affect you. You still have a long way to go in Chongling. If you walk with special emotions, this path will be harder. The voices grew louder outside the carriage. Ding Ning lifted the curtain of the carriage and looked out. He saw more and more pedestrians on the road. Some were peddlers pushing small carts, and some were obviously people who came to visit relatives and friends in the temple fair. They all changed into new clothes, and some were obviously devout believers, carrying many offerings to the gods and Buddhas. I remember reading in a book that cultivation is divided into several major realms. At the beginning, it is seeing mountains and water, then the world, seeing oneself, and then seeing all living beings. Ding Ning looked at the people coming and going and said softly, to cultivate to a high level, one must be able to see others, but not be influenced by others. Do you feel the saying is reasonable? Shui Wangshu stilled. His brow furrowed deeply. After thinking for a dozen breaths, he asked solemnly, what book did you read? Ding Ning shook his head. I forgot. It seems to be a storybook. It seems reasonable. Shui Wangshu's brow was still deeply furrowed. After a moment of thought, he sighed softly. Pity that even if I heard this saying years ago, I would not have had any special feelings before I entered Realm 7. Now, I do not seem to have enough time to study and verify if it is true. Following the official road and passing through a natural valley, the carriage passed through the plains in front of them. There were fewer farmlands, but more and more courtyards. Travel document. As a low shout came from the card, they officially entered the borders of Zhushan district. People of Chongling? The numerous soldiers who were inspecting clearly stilled when they saw Ding Ning and Shui Wangshu's travel documents. Then they were shocked when they saw Shui Wangshu's birth and his identity in White Goat Cave. The leading soldier didn't even ask any questions before he quickly let them pass. Yet, just as they entered Zhushan district and found an inn, before they finished drinking a pot of hot tea, a steward dressed in blue brocade robes appeared in front of them. This middle-aged steward with a thin face bowed to Shui Wangshu and Ding Ning, who were sitting casually in a corner of the inn. He said respectfully, "This one is Feng Futong, the steward of the Feng family. I did not know Shui had come. Please excuse me for not coming out to meet you." The Feng family had learned of their arrival so quickly after receiving their travel documents on the roads outside the city, and reacted so quickly. This was enough to prove how powerful the Feng family was in Zhushan district. Yet Shui Wangshu smiled unconcernedly and said, "I do not have a good relationship with the Feng family. There is no need to be so courteous. Shui is of noble status. As the host, the Feng family naturally has to act as a host." Feng Futong's expression did not change. He said humbly, "This inn is very ordinary. If Shui does not dislike it, this one can arrange a remote courtyard for Shui." Shui Wangshu smiled slightly and said, "There is no need for that. Even the worst inn is much more comfortable than my small stone temple." Feng Futong said humbly, "Why is Shui passing through Zhushan district?" If Shui Wangshu took a sip of tea and interrupted the other's polite words. "There is no need for such trouble. I am just traveling with my students into the Ba Mountains to cultivate. We happen to pass by Zhushan district and will leave at noon tomorrow." Feng Futong's voice became even more humble. "Tomorrow is the temple fair to worship the kitchen god, and it will be very lively. Also, because our Feng family has received the care of the Empress a few days ago, she has bestowed upon us a painting. Cave Master Shui is knowledgeable, and you must know that the Empress is not just skilled in calligraphy and painting, but also a great cultivator skilled in the seal path. Her brushes contain cultivation methods and the workings of the primal energies of the universe. That painting is full of wonders and cannot be seen normally. Tomorrow, during the worship, that painting will be invited to the newly built Fire Virtue Hall for worship. Would Shui be interested in seeing it?" Shui Wangshu frowned slightly and looked at Feng Futong. "Steward Feng's eloquence is very high. I have seen many stewards of the noble families in Chongling, but not many can reach Steward Feng's level." Feng Futong's expression froze slightly, but his voice was still extremely polite. "Shui thinks too highly of me. Do not worry." Shui Wangshu said calmly, "How can I not understand the Empress' care for the Feng family? But I am in a hurry and fear I will not be able to attend such a great event." Feng Futong's brows relaxed slightly. Shui Wangshu waved his hand tiredly and said softly, "I like peace and quiet. This one understands." Feng Futong bowed and left without another word. "So fake," Ding Ning said softly as he watched Feng Futong's back disappear. He had listened to the entire conversation. Shui Wangshu glared at him. "You say I am still the steward?" Ding Ning chuckled. "About the same." Shui Wangshu grew serious and said worriedly with a frown, "The Feng family is acting like this because they have heard that I have reached Realm 7. Do you think Feng Qianzhuo will be afraid and refine the Dingyan bead overnight?" "I think not." Ding Ning glanced at him and said calmly, "If so, he would not need to send a steward like this to use the Empress' name to suppress you. If a person feels that using the Empress' name is enough to frighten you, he is not afraid, but just threatening." Shui Wangshu's worries disappeared, and he smiled coldly. "You are right. This steward is not humble, he is clearly threatening." Feng Futong entered the carriage with the insignia of the Feng family. Under the fervent and respectful gazes of many passers-by, he headed towards some secluded courtyards in the distance. Those courtyards were large and had gray walls and black tiles, clearly in the style of Chongling's architecture. They were very different from the mud walls and bamboo buildings of Zhushan district. When the carriage stopped in front of the vermilion gates of a courtyard, Feng Futong got off the carriage. The originally humble steward's figure was abnormally tall and straight at this moment. His entire body flowed with a blade-like coldness, and his originally generous face had also become abnormally cold. Two servants opened the vermilion gates. On the stone path behind the gates, a youth dressed in embroidered robes who looked about the same age as Ding Ning was waiting. This youth had a handsome face, but his hands were behind his back. He looked experienced and dark like a young eagle ready to pounce at any moment. "How is it?" he asked with natural arrogance and disdain as he looked at Feng Futong. Feng Futong bowed slightly and said, "Shui Wangshu says he's just passing by, but I cannot see the truth. I have to be wary. If he is just passing by, the Feng family can treat him with courtesy. Maybe we can give him some convenience due to his cultivation." The proud and dark youth sneered. "But if he wants to make trouble for my grandfather tomorrow, I will make him pay a greater price." After a pause, he looked at Feng Futong, who seemed to agree. The youth asked, "Didn't Shui Wangshu bring a youth called Ding Ning? What do you think?" "We only learned of Shui Wangshu's arrival today. As for this youth's identity, we will not be able to get accurate information from Chongling in a day or two. We can only confirm that he is a cultivator and has not reached vital energy realm." From Shui Wangshu's expression when he looks at him, he should be an outstanding student he has placed his hopes on. He is likely to be his last disciple. The youth smiled, so much his eyes narrowed. If that is the case, then Shui Wangshu better not have any special thoughts tomorrow. Otherwise, I will cripple his proud disciple first. His face was handsome and childish, but the more so, the colder his words sounded when they came out of his mouth. He was Feng Qinghan, Feng Qianzhua's only grandson. Feng Qianzhua had 3 sons, but none of them lived up to expectations. They had a pile of granddaughters. Only the youngest, Feng Qingling, had a son like this. But Feng Qinghan had lived up to expectations. Half a year ago, he had officially entered Vital Energy Realm and was in the 3rd class of Vital Energy Realm. Based on his age, even in Chongling, he was outstanding. Chapter 96. The next day was the main day of the temple fair. Early in the morning, there were people selling fried fruit barley on the streets. The Zheng people's daily life was very different from the Qin. The Qin liked to eat noodles, but the Zheng liked to eat glutinous rice. This fried fruit barley was made from glutinous rice ground into powder, kneaded, and pressed under a large rock for a night. Then it was rolled into balls the size of pigeon eggs, fried in oil, and then covered in a layer of brown sugar. For the Qin people of Chongling and Guangzhou, this was sickeningly sweet to use for breakfast. They would likely throw their bowls in anger because it stuck to their teeth. Ding Ning did not refuse this kind of sweet food. He held a crude bowl and asked for 2. But when he prepared to pay, the woman selling the fried fruit barley firmly refused. She said shyly, "Since you are old Master Feng's guest, how can I accept money for 2 worthless things?" Ding Ning frowned slightly. Looking at this woman who clearly had a thick Xing accent, he asked, "How do you know I am old Master Feng's guest?" Yesterday, the news spread in the city that 2 guests of old Master Feng are staying in this inn, and they both come from Chongling. You clearly have a Chongling accent and are the same as the youth in the rumors. Of course, you are not someone else, the woman explained honestly. It seems that I am fated to be annoying today. Chewing the sticky sweet rice ball, Ding Ning looked at the woman who left shyly. He turned to Shui Wangshu and said, "Now, everyone in the Zheng city thinks we are old Master Feng's guests. But in the end, the guests are going to make trouble for old Master Feng. At that time, we will be especially detestable in their eyes." Shui Wangshu laughed. Sometimes, It feels good to have everyone feel you are detestable, but they cannot do anything to you, especially when you do not need to care about what they think. The fire burned brighter. The Zheng people worshipped the kitchen god not just for the fire to burn so that they could be full and warm at every meal, but also for their days to become more prosperous. So the time to worship the god was at noon when the sun was at its brightest. But the temple fair also included the trading of all kinds of goods. Starting from the morning, Zhushan district became even more lively. Gradually, there was an endless stream of carriages and people. When there was still an hour until noon, cannon sounded from the east and west of Zhushan district at the same time. Drum music started. A group of people wearing strange clothes and colorful masks were the first to walk along the street, singing and dancing. This was the dance of the Zheng people. It was said that this method could be used to communicate with ghosts and gods and beg for Kong and's help. Behind these people were several tall tables carried by several people. On top of the tables were various offerings. According to the rules, after the tribute team set off, a group of men from the kitchen god temple would carry out the kitchen god enshrined in the temple and parade it through the streets. Following the established route, they would be sent back to the fire virtue hall of the kitchen god temple to receive the offerings. Then, the various clans of Zhushan district and the high officials and nobles would take turns to offer incense. At this time, in front of the fire virtue hall, the incense table was ready, and dozens of mahogany chairs were placed on both sides. In an empty space not far from the incense table stood a handsome youth in splendid attire. It was the only grandson of old Master Feng Qinghan. Feng Futong walked quickly towards him and said softly, "Shui Wangxiu and that youth called Ding Ning do not seem to plan on leaving the inn. They said they would leave today, but they are not leaving the inn now. It seems they really do have ideas." Feng Qinghan sneered disdainfully. If they really do have ideas, then they are asking for trouble. At the same time, multiple carriages were waiting in a quiet manner. In an elegant little building in the garden, two maids were serving a man who looked to be at most in his 50s to groom and wash up. One attendant put a towel soaked in ointment on the man's face and gently rubbed it. The other attendant was using an agarwood comb to gently comb his black hair. This man was unusually patient as he waited for the heat from the towel to seep into his skin. When the towel cooled and the attendant changed it to a clean towel to help him clean his face and fix his sideburns, he asked the middle-aged man who had been bowing at the door. Shui Wangxiu said he was leaving but hasn't left yet. The middle-aged man waiting at the door did not show any dissatisfaction and answered clearly and quickly, "He does not appear to be leaving. He really wants to wait for me? Shui Wangxiu can disregard his life, but I, Feng Qianjua, have a great family and business. Why should I lower myself to stand at the same place as him?" When I appeared, I told him not to appear. This man enjoying the clothing of the two attendants was naturally the master of the Feng family, the most beloved of Zhushan district, Feng Qianjua. After saying this, he looked at the middle-aged man and said, "But to prevent accidents, have 8th mistress come as well. But do not arrange a seat for her, just wait with you." The dance troupe was almost at the Zheng's kitchen god temple. "Follow me." Seeing that it was about time, Shui Wangxiu brushed off the peanut shells that had fallen off his body. He looked at Ding Ning, who had no interest in the third plate of salted peanuts, and then stood up. Most of the people had moved with the dance troupe, so the streets around the inn were deserted. Yet Shui Wangxiu was at the front. Ding Ning followed Shui Wangxiu a dozen steps when dozens of men in gray robes walked out of the surrounding streets. Metal reflections also lit up on the roofs in all directions. A dark-skinned but thin and powerful man walked warily in front of Shui Wangxiu and Ding Ning. He wanted to speak, but before he could, Shui Wangxiu looked coolly at him. He felt the other's gaze hit his mind like two giant hammers. His legs couldn't help but go soft, and he almost fell to the ground. "Your Feng family doesn't have many capable people. Unless Feng Qianjua comes in person, no one can stop me," Shui Wangxiu said disinterestedly. With a puff, the dark-skinned, thin, and powerful man spat out a mouthful of blood. He bit the tip of his tongue and used the pain to clear his mind. "We can't stop you, but we can die." The dark-skinned man showed no fear. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. He pulled out a short sword and pointed it at his throat. He sneered. "If word gets out, Shui, you'll start a massacre here for a personal grudge." After a pause, the man looked at Shui Wangshu and said coldly, "I know Shui's cultivation is high, but I'm afraid you won't be able to stop many of us from committing suicide. Also, I can remind Shui that we are all Zheng people. Even if Shui does not fear Her Highness the Empress' anger, if the matter becomes too big, I think White Goat Cave will pay a great price." Looking at the vicious gazes of the man and the people around him, Shui Wangshu frowned slightly. He had considered that Feng Qianzhua would stop him from meeting Feng Qianzhua, but he had not expected the other to use such a method. "You are from the Feng family. Are you rebelling by doing this?" Just as he was hesitating, Ding Ning's calm voice sounded. The dark-skinned man and the people around him who were willing to sacrifice themselves for the Feng family looked in puzzlement at this Chongling youth. They did not understand what Ding Ning meant. "Originally, we had no interest in a temple fair like this, but yesterday, we heard your steward say that this temple fair will be different from the past. Most importantly, Her Highness the Empress painting and calligraphy will be enshrined in the Fire Virtue Hall. We are going now to see Her Highness painting and calligraphy." Ding Ning looked calmly at the people around him and said slowly and clearly, "Even if you do not admit it now, after you die, if they investigate in the future, they will easily find your relationship with the Feng family. We want to see Her Highness the Empress painting and calligraphy, but you will not let us go. You Zheng people are trying to stop us Qin people from seeing the Empress painting and calligraphy. The Feng family wants to rebel. You Zheng people do not want to live and want to be wiped out one by one." After saying this, Ding Ning pulled on Shui Wangshu's sleeve. He did not look at these people and continued to walk forward. Shui Wangshu looked at him with eyes full of praise. He didn't say anything else and walked straight ahead. The dark-skinned man with a short sword and the other Zheng people thought back to Ding Ning's words. Cold sweat seeped out of their skin and quickly soaked their undergarments in this cold weather. "No wonder Wang Taishu is so impressed by you." Shui Wangshu turned to look at Ding Ning and said softly with a smile, "You don't just have the ability to see through the clouds. It seems that you are also skilled in using clever words and using righteousness to suppress people." Ding Ning smiled coldly and said disdainfully, "Playing politics and using principles that can decide life and death to scare people. How can the people of this wild place compare to the people of Chongling?" Shui Wangshu laughed and said, "I just do not know what other tricks the Feng family has. Deal with them as they come." Ding Ning glanced at him. "I heard that the best debaters do not give the other a chance to ask questions and speak." Shui Wangshu thought about it and said, "That makes sense." The moment he spoke, a gentle wave of primal energies of the universe came out of his body. His and Ding Ning's steps did not seem any different than usual, but in the next moment, their figures were unimaginably fast. The passers-by only felt wind blow past the eaves. In the blink of an eye, they saw two faint figures disappear like clouds and cranes. Chapter 97. In front of the Fire Virtue Hall, the important people of Zhushan district had arrived one after another. They sat on the two sides of the tables prepared for incense and offerings. But the front row of the two sides was still empty. Just like in the past, these seats were reserved for the old master of the Feng family and his children. In the view of most people of Zhushan district could only continue to prosper if the Feng family prospered. Feng Qinghan was still young. While he was famous in Zhushan district, he did not need to meddle in these matters. So, after greeting the important people who had arrived, he just stood silently to the side and waited. The path was unusually crowded. The crowd was like a tide. They would only part when the procession carrying the kitchen god or dancing gods passed by, and then close again. It would take a long time for the people in the distance to squeeze to the front of the Fire Virtue Hall. Yet Feng Qinghan's eyes suddenly narrowed slightly. A faint murderous intent rose on his young face. He saw a white cloud energy fly over at astounding speed from the distant eaves. In the crowd in front of the Fire Virtue Hall, some people also saw this strange phenomenon, and exclamations continuously sounded out. It was possible to see two figures in the white cloud energy. This was no different from the legendary sword immortals who rode the clouds. Feng Futong took a deep breath. As the most capable steward of the Feng family, he was naturally more cautious than Feng Qinghan. So at this moment, he did not feel anticipation like Feng Qinghan and felt slightly uneasy. Shui Wangshu landed on the scene. Among the important people who had already sat down, there were naturally many cultivators. Yet they could all feel the vast primal energies of the universe in the cloud energy. This presence was like the difference between heaven and earth compared to their cultivation. So everyone's hearts trembled. No one dared to make a sound. The scene was completely silent. This silence spread outwards. Even the crowd around the Fire Virtue Hall quieted down and stopped making noise. Feng Qinghan naturally knew what realm this white-haired and white-bearded old man had reached. Yet he did not feel any fear, and an even colder smile appeared at the corners of his mouth. His gaze fell on Ding Ning, who was standing behind Shui Wangshu. Ding Ning stood behind Shui Wangshu, as calm as ever. He sensed Feng Qinghan's malicious gaze. Although he didn't even know Feng Qinghan's identity, he had already vaguely guessed a certain possibility. He didn't even look back at Feng Qinghan. He just unconsciously shook his head. Feng Futong came forward and bowed respectfully to Shui Wangshu, saying, "Shui, why did you change your mind today and come to watch?" Shui Wangshu turned to look at Ding Ning and then at Feng Futong. He smiled faintly and said, "Yesterday, he said I was a hypocrite. Today, let's not be so hypocritical." Feng Futong's expression froze slightly. He said softly, "Today, there is an offering of the Empress painting. I fear this is not appropriate." Shui Wangshu said calmly, "Of course, it is to liven things up for the people of Zhushan district after seeing the Empress painting." Feng Futong took a deep breath and didn't say anything else. He made a gesture of invitation and said, "If this is the case, then Shui, please sit." Shui Wangshu said coolly, "I have sat for a long time. Standing is fine." Feng Futong was silent and respectfully retreated. Since they were no longer hypocritical, no one paid attention to Shui Wangshu and Ding Ning. The people of Zhushan district who had already taken their seats saw Shui Wangshu's attitude towards Feng Futong and guessed that Shui Wangshu and Ding Ning had not come to support, but to seek revenge. Cold disdain appeared in their eyes. In their opinion, the Feng family would never be afraid of trouble. What they needed to see was how these two outsiders would end up. The kitchen god statue that had made a round sat down first. Then the dance troupe danced even harder around the kitchen god statue. All kinds of offerings were placed on the tribute table. Almost the moment the offerings were placed, the crowd outside cheered. A light carriage walked at the front. The carriage was draped with embroidered curtains and looked unusually luxurious. However, no one was sitting on it. There was only a jade tablet in the middle and a brocade scroll in the middle. A group of people followed closely behind the carriage. They were all members of the Feng family. Among them, Feng Qianzhua, dressed in plain Buddhist robes, was at the front. The people on both sides of the road were extremely respectful to Feng Qianzhua. Some people even knelt down along the street to pay their respects to him. Seeing such a scene, Ding Ning's expression was extremely calm, like a rock in the waves. Shui Wangshu couldn't help but shake his head. "It seems that he is very good to the Zheng people of this place," Ding Ning said in a cool tone like Zhang Sun Qianxue. "If he is really good, he should have died with his other sect brothers when the army attacked the Bazan Kendo ground." Shui Wangshu looked worriedly at him and said, "It is not good to know too much about the story." Ding Ning said, "Whether it is the story or the present, some truths will not change. This is why I like senior sect brother Zhang Yi and not senior sect brother Su Qin." Shui Wangshu stilled slightly and then said approvingly, "It is reasonable. Even if Zhang Yi is soft-hearted and wishy-washy, he does care for his fellow sect members sometimes. It is hard to say who is right or wrong, but first, we have to talk about integrity." Feng Qianzhua walked to the front of the incense table. In this process, he didn't even look at Shui Wangshu. Amidst the respectful shouts of the surrounding mountain people, he didn't show any arrogance and maintained absolute humility. It was as though the carriage in front of him was not just the painting of the Empress, but the Empress herself. He was the first to light the incense, and then started to speak. Unlike previous years, the focus of his words was naturally on the painting of the Empress. He spoke of how generous the Empress was and how she cared for the people of Zhushan district. Today, for the annual Kitchen God Temple Festival, the Empress had personally drawn an auspicious painting to pray for all the people of Zhushan district. Hearing these words, the words, "Your Highness" and "Your Highness," kept ringing in his ears. A layer of coldness slowly rose on Ding Ning's calm face, with his head bowed. He thought disdainfully inside, but did not say it out loud to avoid Shui Wangshu's worry. If the noblest woman of the Qin dynasty was so generous and cared for the Zheng people, why had she not spoken when the Zheng had been destroyed and countless Zheng people had died in labor and migration? In that time, she had been even colder than many Qin people because she did not want people to associate her with the Zheng people. If this was a hint of repentance and compensation for her past coldness, when she thought of the many other things in the past, when she thought of those excessive coldness, would she feel a hint of repentance? The temple festival quickly entered its climax. Amidst the thunderous cheers of the people of Zhushan district, Feng Qianzhua solemnly bowed to the painting scroll. Then he took out the painting scroll, walked in front of the statue of the kitchen god, and untied the golden threads binding the painting scroll. All the noise quickly disappeared, and the scene quickly quieted. Everyone wanted to see what was in the painting that the Empress had personally drawn. Ding Ning also wanted to know. So he took a deep breath and slowly raised his head. Feng Qianzhua's hands were unusually steady as the painting slowly unfurled in his hands. Sounds of disbelief sounded. Many people of Zhushan district trembled in terror. Some were even about to cry, because the painting that Feng Qianzhua had unfurled was completely blank. It was an unusual kind of white that gave off an indescribable coldness that caused people to think of bitter and cold snow. The Empress had given a painting, yet there was nothing on the painting except a patch of white and bitter coldness. What did this mean? Had Zhushan district done something wrong, and the Empress was using this painting to express some kind of warning? However, at this moment, most people's eyes involuntarily widened. A majestic aura suddenly flowed out from the cold and empty picture scroll. Only cultivators could sense that many paths of primal energies of the universe had suddenly appeared in the world in front of the scroll. Those were seal lines formed by consciousness. Threads of red seeped out of the blank painting. Bright red appeared in the bitter and cold snow. Then everyone saw that this was a red plum blossom in full bloom. The moment this red plum blossom completely appeared on the painting, threads of true red fire energy appeared in the air ahead. They slowly rose and formed red flowers in the air. These flowers caused the air around the fire virtue hall to warm up. The bitter cold is gone. The red plum blossoms, this is the sweetness after bitterness. Someone in the crowd shouted out such words. The terror and bewilderment of the people of Zhushan district disappeared. Looking at the flowers formed from true fire energy, their eyes were filled with awe and gratefulness. This kind of scene, this kind of majesty, was a true miracle to them. The Empress cultivation is higher than mine. Sensing the invisible seal lines and the gentle primal energies of the universe in the air, Shui Wangshu said solemnly and respectfully, I fear that she is just one step away from Realm 8. Ding Ning's face was slightly pale. Reflected by the bright red flowers, his face looked a bit sickly red. At this time, Feng Qianzhua's gaze finally landed on Shui Wangshu. At this age, what else could he not understand? Did he still want to be angry after seeing a painting like this? He could not understand Shui Wangshu's thoughts and couldn't help but shake his head. Chapter 98. Shui Wangshu saw Feng Qianzhua shake his head. He smiled proudly and thought, Some things are not something a cultivator, like you who only wants to enjoy the rest of his life, can understand. Feng Qianjue's eyebrows slowly rose. He held the painting scroll and turned to walk towards the pavilion at the highest point of the Fire Virtue Hall. The Fire Virtue Hall had been built specifically to worship the Empress painting scroll. The pavilion at the top was taller than all the statues in the temple. The Zheng people of Zhushan district did not have any objections to this. Because the Empress allowed them to have statues here, there were statues here. Because she allowed them to maintain the etiquette of the Zheng people, they could live like this. The Empress should be taller than all the statues here. That pavilion did not have a staircase to connect to the temple below. But as Feng Qianjue walked higher and higher, there seemed to be an invisible ladder in the air that steadily supported his body. This scene was like a miracle to the ordinary people of Zhushan district. So in their eyes, the Empress was naturally taller than all the statues here, and the old master of the Feng family was at least as tall as all the statues here. Realm 6 First Class, about the same as that old man Di Qingmei, and one door away from Realm 7. Even now, he still does not give up, and wants to show off to me. Looking at Feng Qianjue, who is walking slowly and steadily in the air, Shui Wangxiu smiled faintly. He means to say that there is only one door between us. But he comes from the Bazan Kendo ground, and has the powerful sword skills and swords of the Bazan Mountain. He may not lose to me. But even now, he is still trying to scare me. He probably does not know that my senior sect brother and I split the white goat spirit vein into 3 to reject the owner of the painting scroll in his hand. It is about time. Follow me closely. After smiling faintly, he looked seriously at Ding Ning next to him and warned softly, "The situation may be chaotic. I do not want to come so far for you only to be cut by 2 swords." Ding Ning was looking up at Feng Qianjue. Hearing Shui Wangxiu's words, he shook his head and said, "It is about time. But later, the one to attack first may be me, and not you." Shui Wangxiu stilled. "What do you mean?" Ding Ning said expressionlessly, "While I am not willing, it seems that someone has set their sights on me." Shui Wangxiu looked around in shock. He finally understood Ding Ning's meaning and said softly, "It should be Vital Energy Realm 3rd Class. Just like how I have one more door than Feng Qianjue, the other has one more door than you. Do you have confidence?" Ding Ning nodded and said, "He is weaker than Su Qin." All the important people of Zhushan district looked at Shui Wangxiu and Ding Ning, who were conversing softly. Their expressions grew more complicated and expectant. After presenting the painting, Feng Qianjue floated down to the ground. "This is all thanks to His Majesty and Her Highness the Empress. Of course, I cannot do nothing in coming to attend the ceremony." "Feng Qianjue, your sword has not been shown for a long time. My sword is about to rust. Why don't we use this chance to liven up the atmosphere with our swords?" "Shui Wangxiu of White Goat Cave, please enlighten me." This time, Shui Wangxiu remembered Ding Ning's words. The best debater was not to give the other time to react. So when Feng Qianjue's feet touched the ground, he spoke. His voice was gentle, but unusually clear. All the people of Zhushan district gathered around the Fire Virtue Hall heard him clearly. Feng Qianjue frowned slightly. He thought, how could this old thing not know what was good for him? Publicly making trouble at a time like this. Disregarding the fact that you may not win against me, even if you win by 1 or 2 moves, even if I return the Dingyan bead to you, will you have the fortune to enjoy it when you return to Chongling? They came to challenge the old master of the Feng family? Didn't the Feng family say they were guests? The Feng family treated them with courtesy even if they want to challenge they chose this time? The discussion grew louder. When Feng Qianjue frowned and everyone saw his displeasure, curses rose like a tide. What status do you have? What are you? What right do you have to challenge the old master of the Feng family? Someone shouted from the crowd. What status? Shui Wangxiu did not care and waited for Feng Qianjue to speak. But at this time, Ding Ning's calm voice sounded. He is the cave master of White Goat Cave. The gates of White Goat Cave have a restriction seal bestowed by His Majesty. Usually, when the officials of Chongling come to the gates of White Goat Cave, they must obtain his permission before entering. Only a cultivation place that has sent many cultivators to the Qin dynasty has such an honor. He is a sect master that His Majesty has recognized. You say that his status is less than someone who is not even a county governor and is just the master of a slightly prosperous family? You are looking down on His Majesty too much, aren't you? His voice was not loud. Yet when he spoke, the surroundings immediately became absolutely silent. The people who had just cursed felt endless terror and unconsciously retreated. They were already so fearful of the Empress, much less the high and mighty Yuanwu Emperor. In terms of arguing and using righteousness to suppress people, these mountain people are not a match for you. Shui Wangxu turned to look at Ding Ning and smiled. Then he looked at the silent Feng Qianzhua and said in a provocative tone, "Say something. Do you want these young people to chase me away? Are you not afraid they will say more rebellious things? You really should not have come. You lost your life for a Dingyan bead. This is not a good deal," Feng Qianzhua said coldly, slightly angered at these words. Shui Wangxu looked at him and shook his head seriously. "This is not just about the Dingyan bead. There is also the sword that landed on my senior sect brother. Without your sword, my senior sect brother may have broken through the door that you have not been able to step through." Feng Qianzhua's expression grew colder. He said with slight disdain, "Is Realm 7 so easy to enter? Much less a loser." Shui Wangxu looked coolly at him and said, "If we are not on the same page, it is pointless to speak. In the end, the sword will speak. You two are old. If you are injured from using the sword, it will not be good." Also, Shui likely came prepared. "My grandfather has not used the sword for a long time. This is not fair to begin with." At this moment, a childish and cold voice sounded out. "Dueling with swords to gain more combat experience is something that we youths should do." Hearing this voice, Shui Wangxu turned to look at Feng Qinghan, who had a young face but a dark and cold gaze. He sighed softly with a thread of true sympathy. "This is an adult matter. Children should not interfere." Feng Qinghan felt that he had been underestimated. Anger rose. He puffed out his chest and said in a cold voice, "Shui, why are you so aggressive? I see that, Shui, you have also brought a young disciple. What do you think if I challenge him now?" Shui Wangxu thought of his previous conversation with Ding Ning and couldn't help but sigh. He thought Feng Qianzhua's greatest mistake was not sending this precious grandson to Chongling to study. If he had come to Chongling and seen many young geniuses much stronger than him, Feng Qinghan would not be so arrogant right now. Thinking of this, he became happy. The more he looked at Ding Ning, the more pleasing he found him. Ding Ning slowly looked up. He did not have much interest in bullying Feng Qinghan. He had too many people to catch up to and too many things to do. He naturally did not care about the feelings of a youth. However, he was afraid of trouble. So he asked directly, "If I win, will you return the Dingyan bead to White Goat Caves?" Feng Qinghan's eyes lit up. He could not suppress his joy. He turned and bowed to Feng Qianzhua and said, "Grandfather, please allow it." Feng Qianzhua's brows still did not loosen. Just from the previous words and Ding Ning's calm expression, he felt that this Chongling youth following Shui Wangxu was dangerous. But he could sense that this Chongling youth was very thin and weak and had not reached vital energy realm. Even if there was something special, even if Feng Qinghan really lost, this was just a victory between children. This seemed to be the best response right now. In fact, he even praised his beloved grandson from the bottom of his heart. Compared to the mediocrity of his 3 sons, this grandson was extraordinary. "Shui Wangxu, let my eldest grandson fight your disciple. If your disciple wins, I will give the Dingyan bead to you. But I have to make this clear. This Dingyan bead was won from your senior sect brother during a treasure hunt in the ruins of an ancient sect. It is not something that belongs to White Goat Cave." After Feng Qianzhua said this, he shouted to the people behind him, "Li Zhu, bring that bead over." As he shouted, a beautiful woman quickly walked in front, took down a bead hanging from her neck, and handed it to Feng Qianzhua. This was a snowy white bead the size of a longan. It flashed strangely, like it was breathing, and gave off light. Looking at this bead, Feng Qinghan laughed so hard his eyes narrowed. He turned around and looked at Ding Ning, who was still standing behind Shui Wangshu. He said mockingly, "Do not hide behind other people if you win against me. This bead is White Goat Caves." Many of the important people of Zhushan district who were sitting on mahogany chairs looked with schadenfreude at Shui Wangshu and Ding Ning. They felt that this time, Shui Wangshu and Ding Ning had been checkmated and could not come down. Yet to everyone's surprise, Ding Ning did not waste words. He calmly took a few steps forward in front of Shui Wangshu. Then he pulled out his sword and said, "Please." Chapter 99. Shui Wangshu couldn't help but shake his head. Everything was developing as Ding Ning had just now said. As expected, he was following behind Ding Ning. Sometimes, he could not understand Ding Ning's meticulous observation and judgment, which seemed to be able to see through people's hearts. Because this ability, in addition to talent, often came from experience in life. Ding Ning held his sword across his chest. Many whispers reached his ears. They were mocking him for holding a remnant sword. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Feng Qianzhua's expression did not change. His heart grew colder. He had truly lived like a prince for too long. He didn't even recognize this sword anymore. Feng Qinghan's gaze landed on Ding Ning's remnant sword. Even Feng Qianzhua did not recognize the last flower sword that had changed in appearance due to its fracture. He, who had not been born when the Bazin Kendo ground changed, naturally could not recognize this sword. He looked at the uneven fracture and fine cracks on the sword in Ding Ning's hand, and more disdain appeared at the corners of his mouth. With a soft hiss, he pulled out his sword. The sword that appeared in his hand was about 3 feet long and unusually thin. In the center of the white blade, a black seal line stretched from the hilt to the edge. It was like an ink line drawn on a sword-shaped piece of white paper. Ding Ning's brows slowly furrowed. He recognized this sword. This was the painting sword of the Bazin Kendo ground. In the former Bazin Kendo ground, only the most noble people were worthy of possessing this sword. Now, such a sword had appeared in Feng Qinghan's hand. Seeing Ding Ning's frown, Feng Qinghan's eyes grew smug. He thought that Ding Ning felt great pressure because of the sword in his hand. However, his movements did not stop for long. "Please." His mocking voice had just sounded when he turned into an afterimage, cutting across a distance of several meters. There was a loud bang. The swords in his and Ding Ning's hands had already collided. Countless sharp sword edges flew out in all directions, and 2 semicircular arcs of light appeared between the two of them. Between the arcs of light, there were many flower-like stars surging, blooming with their own power. This stalemate only lasted for a short moment. In less than a breath's time, Feng Qinghan's figure paused slightly. The painting sword in his hand was still swinging forward. A layer of sword light constantly surged on the sword like flowing water. However, the light in front of Ding Ning had completely shattered. The sleeve of his right hand that held the sword had already been torn by the sword qi. He retreated in distress. His feet stepped on the stone pavement one after another, and the soles of his shoes gave off cracking sounds. Feng Qianzhua's expression relaxed slightly, and he exhaled softly. This first test proved that while this Chongling youth was skilled in swordsmanship, in terms of power, there was a great disparity between him and Feng Qinghan. The nobility of Zhushan district sitting on the mahogany chairs had even greater disdain in their eyes. This was the great difference between energy refinement realm and vital energy realm. The ordinary people of Zhushan district were still in shock from the collision of the swords. They could not imagine that Feng Qinghan and Ding Ning's small bodies contained such terrifying power, but no matter what, the other had been sent flying by the young master of the Feng family. Clearly, he was not a match. For a moment, cheers and applause rose from all directions. Looking at Ding Ning, who still had not steadied himself, Feng Qinghan had even more disdain on his face. Yet, he did not continue to attack. His eyes narrowed slightly. Vital energy slowly flowed out of his hand and through the ink line on the paper-white sword. He focused and slashed at the air between him and Ding Ning. The white sword shadow slashed through the air. However, a black sword aura stopped in the air, not moving at all. Suddenly, a black line appeared in the cold air. Seeing this black line, many of the nobility of Zhushan district started to breathe faster, and their gazes grew cold. This was clearly a seal line. Everyone in Zhushan district knew that Feng Qinghan was a talented cultivator, but no one had known that he mainly cultivated the sword seal path. Using sword qi to draw talismans, every sword qi was a talisman line. In the end, they would form various complete talismans, which would be able to gather even more heaven and earth yuan qi and release even more power. This was a method of dual cultivation of the sword and seal. It was also a very difficult method to master. Even if it was just drawing, it was much more difficult to draw in the empty air than on yellow paper. Also, there could not be any deviation. Otherwise, the seal lines would not be able to resonate with the primal energies of the universe. Feng Qinghan's cultivation was higher than this Chongling youth. Now that he showed such astounding swordsmanship, what chance did this Chongling youth have to win? Feng Qinghan's expression was slightly disdainful, but his gaze was focused. He swung his sword again, and another black seal line appeared in the air in front of him. The two seal lines did not cross, but there was an inexplicable reaction between them. Black smoke appeared. Ding Ning finally stopped retreating. His right sleeve was in tatters, and there were even bloody marks on the back of his hand. But to everyone's puzzlement, he still had no fear on his face, and was still calm. Looking at the two seal lines that started to give off black smoke in the air, the broken sword in his right hand steadily swung forward. The inky green sword seemed to move like the sword move he had made in front of Shui Wangshu in the carriage. As the inky green sword moved quickly, multiple white seal lines appeared in the air in front of him. All of the nobility of Zhushan district who had thought that Ding Ning had no chance of winning stilled. Feng Qianzhua's expression froze, and his pupils contracted. This was clearly the sword seal path. Feng Qinghan immediately saw the multiple white seal lines. A strong feeling of disbelief filled his body. He mainly cultivated this kind of sword move, and naturally knew how difficult it was to cultivate both sword and seal. He had started to draw seals when he was 3 years old, and started to wield a sword when he was 6. He only had some success half a year ago, but this Chongling youth, who was about the same age as him, was also able to use this move. He seemed to be more skilled than him, and his sword move was faster. Ding Ning's expression did not change. The remnant sword in his hand continued to move smoothly through the air. In the span of a breath, more than a dozen white seal lines appeared in front of him. These dozen or so white talisman lines intersected with the previous talisman lines in the air, forming a square talisman. Chi, a cracking sound was heard. In the next moment, this seal suddenly collapsed, but cold energy gathered in front of him at an unimaginable speed. Thousands of pear trees bloomed in the air. Countless white ice flowers connected together to form ice trees that pressed down on Feng Qinghan. Feng Qinghan's face paled slightly. With a shout, he swung his painting sword several times. As multiple black seal lines appeared, the sword seal in front of him finally formed. With a loud bang, a cloud of black smoke rushed out like a dragon. There seemed to be countless black bats rampaging inside, hissing and howling. The exceptionally beautiful ice tree was instantly shattered, turning into countless ice shards that splashed backward. The same sword seal path, but due to the difference in cultivation, there was a clear difference in power. Yet no one in Zhushan district cheered, because Ding Ning's sword move was very fast. Other than accuracy, the key to the sword seal path was speed. In this short period of time, another patch of white sword light appeared in front of Ding Ning. A square white sword seal had formed again. The glowing ice shards that were flying backwards in front of him were stopped in the air by a new power and then quickly turned into fine ice crystals. An even greater power exploded forward. These ice crystals and the new ice trees gathered together and pushed forward. There was a strange shout. Feng Qinghan retreated quickly. His painting sword continuously slashed forward. The dragon-like black smoke lost its power. Countless sharp ice shards pierced through the black smoke and shot out. The ice shards collided with his painting sword and gave off ear-splitting sounds. As he retreated, countless ice shards fell to the ground in front of him. His hair and robes were also covered in snow-white ice shards that were beginning to melt. Ding Ning was still calm. He started to move forward. In Feng Qinghan's line of sight, his figure emerged from the scattered ink dragon, bringing with him a brand new sword seal. The white sword talisman was between shapeless and tangible. It gave everyone the feeling that it was a white square seal. Ding Ning lifted it up with the tip of his sword and smashed it towards Feng Qinghan. Feng Qinghan screamed again. His vital energy surged out of his body and into the ink line on the white sword. At the tip of the sword, a black ball of light rapidly expanded and formed a black pool of ink. There was a loud explosion. The power of the white sword seal was shattered. Feng Qinghan's retreating figure immediately stopped. Yet what made him grit his teeth and feel a threat of helplessness was that he saw Ding Ning's figure also stop. Another white sword seal had formed in front of Ding Ning. They were both using the sword seal path, but the other sword move was so fast that he did not even have a chance to use the sword seal path. All of the important people of Zhushan district sitting on their red wooden chairs had ugly expressions. Have you ever seen a cultivator of this age who can use the sword seal path so well? If I am not wrong, this should be the White Goat Ice River Sword Seal Manual of White Goat Cave. The difficulty of this sword manual is no less than Feng Qinghan's Ba Mountain Ink Dragon Seal Sword Manual, one of the important people said coldly to a person next to him. Previously, this Chongling youth was calm. I saw that he was extraordinary, but I had not expected him to be so extraordinary. In the history books, it is rare to see someone who can use the sword seal path so well at such an age. That person took a deep breath and said gravely, his cultivation is a realm lower than the others, but after being beaten like this, he can admit defeat. While everyone in Zhushan district hoped that Feng Qinghan could win, the conversation between these two people could represent the feelings of most of the important people. But Feng Qinghan was not willing to accept this. He did not want to admit defeat. I had not expected you to have such strength, but from the start, I did not want to defeat you, but cripple you. He glared viciously at Ding Ning and said coldly inside. A hint of cruelty and viciousness appeared at the corners of his mouth. As he channeled his vital energy into the painting sword again, his left hand moved slightly. A purple gold talisman slid out of his sleeve and landed in his left hand. Chapter 100. Ding Ning, who dared to assassinate Song Shenshu alone right after entering Energy Refinement Realm, naturally had extraordinary combat experience. But when Feng Qinghan's gaze became slightly strange, and before the purple gold seal appeared in Feng Qinghan's hand, he sensed danger. Without the slightest pause, his body once again leaped backwards. The remnant sword in his hand drew seal lines in front of him again. But compared to before, he drew seal lines at an astounding speed. His physical energy flowed out even faster. The rapid flow of physical energy even cracked his fingernails and caused them to bleed. Two sword seals formed at the same time in front of him. There was a loud explosion. Unlike the previous sword talismans, when the two sword talismans exploded, they did not condense icy cold yuan qi. Instead, they exploded into two balls of dense green yuan qi. There seemed to be two green mountains rising and closing in front of him. All of the Zhushan district cultivators watching the battle had grave expressions. No matter what kind of sword seal manual it was, there could not be only one sword move or only one kind of seal. But the more sword seals one could draw, the further one could go on the sword seal path. Previously, Feng Qinghan's skill in sword seal path, compared to Ding Ning's display of turning two sword seals into green mountains, was like the difference between a toddler learning to walk and an adult who could run. Feng Qinghan knew that he had greatly underestimated the strength of this Chongling youth behind Shui Wangshu, but He did not care at this time. Following his shout, an extremely powerful talisman intent suddenly burst forth from his left hand, enveloping an area of more than 30 meters around him. All of the air in this area froze and vibrated strangely. Even the heavy kitchen god statue behind him began to tremble, as if in fear of this power. Shui Wangshu's eyes narrowed slightly, his brows cold as though there was a layer of transparent ice flashing. The purple gold seal flew out of Feng Qinghan's hand. The golden seal lines on the purple seal seemed to be some kind of strange being that flew out of the seal and quickly spread towards the space in front of them. In the next moment, amidst the shocked exclamations of countless people, every tiny golden talisman line grew in size and turned into true golden lightning. Amidst the rising purple energy, the arm-thick golden lightning twisted together. The terrifying presence at the front was like an enormous python with its mouth wide open. Along the way, crackling sounds could be heard as countless charred marks were instantly left on the stone path by the dispersing lightning. The two green mountains could not stop this wild seal essence. When they touched the lightning at the front, they were about to collapse. Ding Ning appeared somewhat lonely as he stood in the middle of the lightning storm, in front of the chaotic primal energies of the universe. Facing the lightning that was many times larger than his body, his expression was complicated. There was sadness, anger, but no fear could be seen. His sword steadily and quickly cut through the air in front of him. The moment the lightning and the two green mountains touched, he turned into a square sword seal. The white sword talisman spread forward, and between the two green mountains, a flowing river instantly appeared. A muffled sound reverberated. Multiple seal essences finally connected and fiercely collided. The two green mountains collapsed. The rushing river flowed backwards, but the lightning python was still moving forward. Dazzling bolts of lightning passed through the mist and water. They reflected more light, and had the presence of a serpent turning into a serpent. Feng Qinghan's eyes showed even more pleasure. His body flew up and followed closely behind. The shattered green primordial qi, the surging water vapor, and the water that had been heated by the thunder fire all rushed backwards. All kinds of presences were squeezed together by an invisible hand and charged towards Ding Ning's body. Ding Ning's body was sent flying backwards. His outer robes were torn by all kinds of powers and gave off tearing sounds. But his sword-wielding right hand was still extremely steady. In this moment, he turned into a sword seal again. Many of the important people of Zhushan district changed expressions. Ding Ning's performance caused his sword seal to carry an unyielding presence of sailing against the current. A patch of gray primal energies of the universe landed on the flowing river. It was like a lone sail in the sky going against the current. The dazzling lightning and wild seal essences continued to move forward. The enormous waves threw up this lone sail and tore it apart. Ding Ning's expression was still absolutely calm. Sensing the direction of those lightning bolts, his eyes suddenly lit up, as bright as the stars. His physical energy furiously flooded into the last flower remnant sword in his hand, into every tiny seal script, and into every tiny crack. He did not draw any more seals. Instead, as countless small white flowers bloomed on the sword, he threw the last flower sword forward. The sword suddenly spread apart. Countless sword threads stretched out like they had when they had pierced Su Qin's left hand. In this moment, looking at these flowers filled with an aura of doom, and feeling Ding Ning's final throw, Feng Qianzhua finally thought of something. His face suddenly turned snow-white, and great fear surged in his body. The remnant sword with the flowers pierced the enormous waves. This was a sword without any support. Yet this sword was not meant to block, but to guide. Good. Sensing the exquisiteness of this sword essence, even the slightly nervous Shui Wangshu could not help but pat his thigh and cheer loudly. The important people of Zhushan district on the red wooden chairs all exclaimed in disbelief. Many of them could not help but stand up. The spreading sword threads and the bolts of lightning touched. Almost all of the lightning flowed along the sword threads into the sword hilt, and then surged out of the sword hilt to form an even brighter wave. Yet the direction of the lightning completely changed. This bright streak of lightning rushed out of the water and into the sky at a slanted angle. There was a loud rumble. As this lightning exploded in the air, the surging waves hit Ding Ning's body. Ding Ning's body retreated, a thread of blood coming out of his mouth. Enough! However, he looked at Feng Qinghan, who was moving along with the flow of the water, and shouted angrily. Feng Qinghan heard his shout, but at this time, he did not hear the strong warning and threat in Ding Ning's shout. He only saw the last flower sword flashing with lightning as it fell. He only saw that Ding Ning was wounded and had no sword in his hand. So he did not pause at all and unhesitatingly stabbed at Ding Ning. Black sword energy once again appeared in front of the painting sword. Ding Ning's expression became absolutely calm again. He had no other choice. Even if it was him, he would have to use all of his power to break Feng Qinghan's sword. Since he had no choice, he did not consider the consequences or anything else. He reached out with his right hand, and his fingers formed a sword. His right hand's fingernails had all cracked and bled. At this time, his physical energy surged out without reservation. The blood followed the physical energy, and a blood sword seemed to appear in his hand. Physical energy and blood did not have much power and could not match the sharp and tough painting sword. But at this time, Feng Qianjue, who had not completely woken up from his memories, was startled awake. He opened his mouth but did not have time to shout. Many seal lines appeared in front of Ding Ning again. Many blood-red seal lines. Feng Qinghan, whose young face had been filled with cruelty, suddenly stopped breathing and his body quickly stiffened. He did not have the time to react. The blood-red seal lines started to burn in front of him. Large amounts of burning primal energies of the universe contracted rapidly. It was as if a setting sun had appeared on the surface of the river with a lone sail and a distant shadow. There was a loud boom. The setting sun and his sword tip collided and immediately shattered into countless blood-red lines of fire. Ah! The moment the blood-red lines of fire pierced his skin, this young master of the Feng family who had wanted to cripple Ding Ning from the start felt terror and gave a shrill scream. Pew 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 pew. The sound of air being penetrated came out of his body. Countless thin lines of fire immediately penetrated his body, carrying small streams of blood as they passed through his body and sprayed onto the stone path behind him. Grandfather, before his body hit the ground, Feng Qinghan felt as though everything in his body had been penetrated. His organs, his marrow, his energy sea, his jade palace. In this moment, he was like a true child. He turned helplessly to look at Feng Qianjue. After a shrill cry, he fainted completely.
Qinghan!
Before most people could react, Feng Qianjue gave an indescribable scream. He dashed out like a mad tiger and caught Feng Qinghan, who had completely fainted. What sword art is this? Using vital energy and blood as a line, he uses a sword. Even if he can be saved, I fear he won't be able to get out of bed after such an attack. The young master of the Feng family was, at this time, all the spectators in Jushan district finally realized what had happened. The shock that followed made most of the people feel cold and numb. Feng Qianjue's face, which was usually gentle and kind like a Buddha, was now extremely distorted. Yet to everyone's surprise, Ding Ning calmly took a few steps forward and picked up his last flower remnant sword that had fallen to the ground. With a boom, it was like a clap of thunder. A spinning wall of wind suddenly appeared around Feng Qianjue. His hair danced like snakes and endless murderousness spread. Shui Wangxiu frowned slightly. He took a step forward and came in front of Ding Ning, who had picked up the sword. Then he looked coolly at the crazed Feng Qianjue and said, "You should know, he asked for it." "Asked for it? Ha ha ha." Feng Qianjue suddenly threw his head back and laughed wildly. "Take my sword." In the next moment, he gave an earth-shaking roar. Chapter 101. Everyone could understand Feng Qianzhua's feelings right now. Yet at this time, a calm voice sounded behind Shui Wangshu. Where is the Dingyan bead? Everyone's gaze once again gathered on Ding Ning. Everyone knew that it was him who had said this, and what he meant. Previously, Feng Qianzhua had promised that if he could defeat Feng Qianzhua, the Dingyan bead would belong to White Goat Cave. Based on this agreement, Feng Qianzhua had to hand over the Dingyan bead. Yet, in this situation, it was inappropriate to ask for the Dingyan bead so calmly. Dingyan bead. Feng Qianzhua laughed in anger. He looked at Feng Qinghan in his hand and said, "Is my grandson's cultivation and life less than a Dingyan bead?" Ding Ning looked calmly at him and said, "Dingyan bead." All the nobility of Zhushan district present were speechless. Ding Ning only said these 3 words, and from his expression, this was a matter of course. Feng Qianzhua was right to give the Dingyan bead, and Feng Qinghan's cultivation and life were less than the Dingyan bead. Feng Qianzhua's eyes were so angry they seemed to burn. Dingyan bead. Ding Ning looked fearlessly at him and repeated calmly. This was like a child stubbornly asking for candy, but Feng Qianzhua felt great disdain and coldness. He handed the bloodied Feng Qinghan to his crying family members who had gathered around him and spread his left hand. The snowy white Dingyan bead flew out of his hand and slowly landed towards Ding Ning. It did not carry any great power, but his expression turned completely cold. "Even if I give it to you, can you use it?" His murderous gaze swept across Ding Ning and Shui Wangshu's bodies as he said in a cold voice. Ding Ning caught the snowy, white Dingyan bead. Then he did something that no one had expected. He took out his water sack, rinsed the Dingyan bead, and then calmly swallowed the Dingyan bead. All the nobility of Zhushan district present sank into silence and shock. Ding Ning didn't even say a word this time, but his actions were like a slap to Feng Qianzhua's face. He used his actions to tell Feng Qianzhua that even if he and Shui Wangshu died here, he would use the Dingyan bead. Even more shocking was that after swallowing the Dingyan bead, Ding Ning closed his eyes and sat down on a rock behind Shui Wangshu. He did not seem to want to care about what was happening around him and started to refine the Dingyan bead. Seeing Ding Ning act like this and hearing the cries behind him, Feng Qianzhua knew he had to be calm, but his hands still uncontrollably trembled. He took a deep breath and reached out his hand. The steward of the Feng family, Feng Futong, who had been praised by Shui Wangshu as a talker, was standing behind him with a pale face and a long sword in a black scabbard. Seeing Feng Qianzhua's hand reach towards him, his hands uncontrollably trembled. Seeing this, Shui Wangshu waited calmly. Feng Qianzhua did not take the sword from the steward. His hand landed on the hilt of the black scabbard sword and started to pull it out. This was a clear indication of his attitude. The hilt of the black scabbard sword was black gold. However, when the long sword was slowly pulled out, it was as if a rainbow was blooming in the field. Many people's bodies were covered in rainbow-colored light. The blade of this long sword was actually made of colored glass, and it was actually 7-colored. Shui Wangshu's furrowed brow suddenly relaxed, as though he had finally found the answer to a question he had been perplexing for a long time. He softly murmured to himself, "So it is this sword." The Bazin Kendo ground had once been the strongest place to cultivate the sword in the Qin dynasty. Naturally, it had countless powerful sword manuals and famed swords. The group of people who had survived the Bazin Kendo ground had received many sword manuals and famed swords. In the past, when Feng Qianzhua defeated Du Qingjiao and took the Dingyan bead, he had used his life-bond sword and not the famed swords of the Bazin Kendo ground. Now, the question of what kind of sword Feng Qianzhua had chosen from the swords of the Bazin Mountains was finally answered. Of all the famed swords of the Bazin Kendo ground, only one was this rainbow. This sword was called the 7-treasure glass sword, also known as the Buddha Light Demon Subduing Sword. Following the appearance of this sword, a huge aura spread out continuously. All the people who were closer to them felt the danger and unconsciously retreated. Even the statue of the kitchen god was moved away. Only Feng Qianzhua, Shui Wangshu, and Ding Ning were left in the open space in front of the Fire Virtue Hall. The rainbow light grew brighter and brighter, and finally turned into rings of Buddha light in Feng Qianzhua's hand. Inexplicable primal energies of the universe gathered in these rings of Buddha light. They surrounded Feng Qianzhua's body and gradually formed an enormous Buddha shrine. In contrast, Feng Qianzhua's body seemed to grow and become venerable with rainbow light. Within the rings of Buddha light, Feng Qianzhua was dazed for a moment. He felt this was absurd. After so many years, that sword that should not have existed in the world had reappeared in front of him because of the revenge of a little white goat cave. After so many years, he still had to use this sword to fight to the death. Yet this was only a brief moment. The stray thoughts in his mind were washed away by the Buddha light and turned into pure murderousness. His wrists flipped, and the sword giving off astounding Buddha light stabbed towards Shui Wangshu. As he stabbed, the rings of Buddha light appeared. Circles of Buddhist light overlapped and alternated. It was as if turbid waves had suddenly appeared between the heavens and the earth. A wild wind rose from the ground. Many of the ordinary citizens of Zhushan district in front of him were unable to stand and were blown backwards. Shui Wangshu's snow-white hair was blown straight back by the wild wind. Yet, facing such wild winds and the surging turbid waves, he shook his head and sighed emotionally. In the end, my spirit is not enough. Using the turbid wave sword manual with the 7 treasures glass sword, the power is more than enough, but it lacks some charm. If my spirit is enough, I would have changed to some Zen sword manuals to cultivate again. Without destruction, there can be no construction. Why not give up my attainments in the turbid wave sword? As he sighed, he reached out towards the turbid waves in front of him. Originally, he had been using the sect master sword of White Goat Cave. At this time, he had given the sect master sword to Li Daoji. He did not have any other swords on him, so he could only use his life-bond sword. What kind of sword was Shui Wangshu's life-bond sword? Ding Ning was also very curious. So he, who had been working hard to refine the Dingyan bead, opened his eyes. An unusually calm presence came from Shui Wangshu's palm. There was no dazzling light, only the most simple color, like the most ordinary stone on the road. The life-bond sword that appeared in Shui Wangshu's hand was like a small sword made from the most ordinary stone. Yet all the cultivators of Zhushan district felt an unusually dangerous presence. At this moment, layers of stone skin peeled off from the small sword's body. Every tiny piece of rock flew forward like a huge rock, slapping towards the monstrous, turbid waves. The sword body that was exposed from the inside was radiating an unimaginable light. The light was so dazzling that no one could see its color clearly. It even made people feel that the sword inside had no substance and was completely formed by the dazzling light. Yet everyone knew that this sword did exist. So, everyone started to react. This sword had been hidden for too long. It was like a peerless sword buried in the earth. The dust around the sword had formed stone. Yet today, this peerless sword finally showed its edge again. The Buddhist light appeared dim in front of the light of the sword. Feng Qianzhua also felt the suffocating pressure. He gave a low growl, and the sword in his hand slashed 72 times into the air in front of him. 72 waves suddenly appeared in the Buddhist light and immediately shattered all the stone that flew over. At this time, all the stone on Shui Wangshu's life-bond sword fell off. Under the blinding and white light, his entire body seemed to be carved from white jade. He did not make any extra movements. He simply stabbed forward like the streets of Chongling. There was a loud boom. The sound came from the distant world. Above his head, an invisible mountain suddenly appeared. It rapidly shrank and surged into the intrinsic sword in his hand. At the same time, almost all of his vital energy and the primal energies of the universe accumulated in his body surged out of his body and into his life-bond sword. He could only use such a powerful sword move once at most. But this was what he wanted. He did not want to be entangled, and just wanted to decide victory with one blow. He only poured out all of his sword intent and power into the sword. The Buddhist light was extinguished. The turbid waves collapsed. Feng Qianzhua was filled with disbelief as he watched the resplendent sword light stab towards him. He could not imagine that Shui Wangshu could make such a powerful blow. He was unwilling to be defeated by this sword just like that. An endless fire was burning in his eyes as he let out a shrill cry. The circle of Buddhist light emanating from the 7 treasures glazed sword in his hand suddenly changed, turning into countless colorful sword beams that bloomed in front of him. In a flash, it seemed like thousands of swords were stabbing towards Shui Wangshu. It was impossible to see which sword was the true 7 treasures glass sword. Yet Shui Wangshu just smiled faintly. His sword move did not change at all, and continued to advance in a straight line. All of the 7 colored sword lights immediately disappeared. Feng Qianzhua's howl turned into a wail as he retreated. Blood sprayed out of his abdomen. His body bounced off the stone path, leaving behind a long trail of blood. He did not stop until he hit the steps in front of the Fire Virtue Hall. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.